we must recognize our responsibilities, including our collective responsibilities to the land and water. Mr. Mayor, there is no supplementary agenda this evening. Rules of decorum at a council meeting. The municipality of Chatham-Kent supports open meetings that welcome debate of public policy issues in an atmosphere of inclusiveness, integrity, civility, fairness, and respect for differing points of view. Anyone conducting themselves in a way that disturbs, disrupts, or impedes the orderly conduct of the meeting, interrupts or makes derogatory statements or hate speech, defamatory comments about councillors, staff, speakers, or fellow members of the public may result in removal from the premises. This also applies to deputations. We ask that you do not approach members of council if they are seated in their council seat. The public, unless invited, is not permitted to come into the gated horseshoe area. The use of posters, signage, and literature is also prohibited. In attendance this evening, just to let the public know that absent is Councillor McGrail and Councillor B. McGregor is participating virtually on the call. There were 2 disclosures of pecuniary interest this evening. The first one is with regards to the planning item 11A, application for consent and zoning bylaw amendment, the estate of Carolina Mysco, 14385 Turin Line, Community of Orford, East Kent, by Councillor Story. And the other one by Councillor Story was item 17B, the application for zoning bylaw amendment for 650 Park Street, Community of Dresden, North Kent. We'll now move on to planning services.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. The process to be followed for each application will be as follows. 1, the clerk will announce each individual planning item. 2, the mayor will ask if there's anyone present other than the applicant with an interest in the application and to indicate so by raising their hand. 3, the clerk will advise if written or video submissions have been received. 4, if someone present other than the applicant indicates an interest in the item, there will be a presentation by administration. 5, individuals with an interest in the application other than the applicant will be asked to proceed to the podium, provide their name and address, and address council. 6, the applicant will be asked if they wish to proceed to the podium and address council. 7, administration will be asked if they have any comments based on any discussion that may have occurred. And 8, council will be asked what action it wishes to take with regards to each item. If any person or public body that files an appeal of a decision of council in respect to the proposed applications does not make oral or written submissions to the municipal clerk before the proposal is approved, they are not entitled to appeal a decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal if otherwise eligible, unless in the opinion of the tribunal there are reasonable grounds to add the person or public body as a party to the appeal. Information on council's actions tonight will be posted on the municipal website. All persons who have made a request or who have made an oral or written submission regarding a particular planning item will receive a notice of council's decision, including appeal procedures. Any other person who wishes to receive a notice of decision must submit a written request to municipal clerk. Thank you.
11A, application for consent and zoning bylaw amendment, estate of Carolina Mysco, 14385 Turin Line, Community of Orford, East Kent. Mr. Mayor, we have 1 conflict of interest by Councillor Story, and no deputations were received today.
Is there anyone present other than the applicant or the agent with an interest in the application? If so, please indicate by raising your hand. Seeing none, Councillor McDonald and Councillor Wright, can I get you to put this on the floor, please?
Happy to move the recommendations.
I'll second it, thank you.
Any questions? Seeing none, we'll put it to vote.
Councillor B. McGregor. All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0. And 11B, application for consent and zoning bylaw amendment, Thames Sales Yard Limited, 13135 Longwoods Road, Community of Camden, East Kent. There are no conflict of interest and no deputations were received.
Is there anyone present other than the applicant or the agent with an interest in this application? If so, please indicate by raising your hand. Seeing none, Councillor Wright and Councillor McDonald, can I get you to put this on the floor,
I'll move that,
please?
thank you.
And seconded.
Any questions? We'll put it to vote.
Councillor McGregor?
Yes.
Thank you. All votes are in. Motion passes 17-0. That ends the planning portion of our meeting this evening. We'll now move on to deputations. There were no deputations received this evening. And the consent agenda. So the following items have been pulled to be voted on separate from the consent agenda. The first item is 14A, R25-240 Cultural Plan Update Project 2025 has been pulled by Councillor Story. And item 14G, Tender Award Contract T25231, King Street West Reconstruction and First Street Water Main Replacement, Community of Chatham, has been pulled by Councillor Story. Item 15A, the Chatham-Kent Population Growth 2025 Update, is pulled for a presentation. 15B, Chatham-Kent Workforce Planning Board 2025 Update, pulled for a presentation. Item 16A, the Public Utilities Commission Master Plan Review with a growth lens. There is a presentation, and it is pulled by Councillor Carmen McGregor and Councillor Sakachi. Item 17A, the Chatham-Kent Community Improvement Plan Property Tax Increment Equivalent Grant for 100 King Street Holdings, Inc. and Chatham King Street, Community of Chatham City, has been pulled by Councillor Story and Councillor Jubenville. Item 17B, application for zoning bylaw amendment for 650 Park Street, Community of Dresden, North Kent, has been pulled by Councillor Jubenville, and there's also a conflict by Councillor Story. Item 18A, Consolidated Non-Core Detailed Asset Management Plan 2025, has been pulled by Councillor C. McGregor, Councillor Anderson, Councillor Sakachi, and Councillor Harrigan. Item 18B, the Talbot Trail Realignment Stage 4 Assessment, pulled by Councillor Anderson. And that is it, Mr. Mayor. Therefore, on the consent agenda, we have the following reports: 14B, C, D, E, F, item 15C, item 18C, D, E, item 19A.
Councillor Anderson and Councillor Thompson, can I get you to put this on the floor, please?
I am happy to do that.
And I am happy to second.
Any questions? Put to vote.
Councillor B. McGregor?
Yes.
Thank you. All votes are in. Motion passes 17-0. Move on to the tender awards. Item 14A, R25-240 Cultural Plan Update Project 2025.
Councillor Story and Councillor Finn, can I get you to put this on the floor, please?
Happy to move that, Mr. Mayor.
Seconded.
Councillor Story, go ahead.
Thank you. I just have a couple of questions on this report, probably to Audrey. Thanks. I just want to thank you for bringing this report forward and bringing culture back into the limelight again. I appreciate always seeing that coming to council. You mentioned in the report that a few of the circumstances that brought this forward in terms of the changing landscape of arts and culture in our community, including the potential move to the downtown Chatham Center. I'm wondering if it might make more sense to wait until we've moved there to see the impacts of what that move to the site might look like before I know the plan could potentially go two different directions. Would we want to perhaps look at doing this plan once we know for sure we're going to be in that site and then looking at the impacts of being at the Sears building versus not?
Through the Mayor, thank you, Councillor, for the question. I'm not sure I'm best qualified to state whether or not, the implications of moving to the hub. What I can say is the reason why this is before you is because it is a council term priority, and collectively you have identified that you do want to update the Culture Master Plan, which is why it is here with you. But I will say, as you pointed out, that there have been a lot of changes to the landscape for culture, continues to change. And this plan is not just about what we do municipally, it's about what happens in our community in relation to arts and culture. So in that regard, I don't think there's ever a wrong time to reassess where we are at in terms of culture across our community.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think planning ahead always makes good sense. it seemed to me that when we were looking at where the future of our cultural assets, our municipal assets, and we've been doing a lot of talk about, really important discussions about our municipal assets, especially the last few months. Once we know where we're going to be, then we would have that clear direction on especially our heritage sites. So I was just thinking that perhaps it might be worth looking at the timing for that. In terms of the tender, the successful bidder, I know that TCI consultants did the previous master plan, and I was actually, I was part of that in my previous life here. Is there a reason why they scored the way they did this time? Because they do obviously have pretty direct involvement in the previous plans. Thank you.
Okay, through the mayor, to answer Councillor Story's question. When we put out RFPs like this, we're following strict municipal guidelines about how we do that. So following our purchasing policy, we're working with our manager of purchasing throughout in terms of what is listed in the document. We then evaluate submissions based on what is returned to us, subject to a series of criteria that we then create in terms of what we're looking for based off what's actually in the the RFP document. We then assemble a team to evaluate those submissions. That team consisted of myself, the manager of arts and culture, and then the manager of growth and planning from our planning area. And we did connect with the Ministry of Culture and Gaming to see if they were, have their interest in the actual document that we put out. But we basically evaluate a respondent's ability to complete the project based on what we believe are the correct things, what we're looking for. So we open the pricing envelope once we have actually completed and identified that the respondent, or identified is capable of completing the work. So ultimately, the recommendation in front of you is to go with ERA Architects and Monumental, and that's basically on the basis of the criteria that were all set out in the RFP document. So everyone had the same opportunity to respond on that, and the evaluation team are putting forward a recommendation for that joint bid.
Thank you. That makes sense, and I know ERA is very capable. They're a very well-known firm, so I look forward to seeing what they come up with. Just last two questions. I appreciated the references to the AODA compliance in the tender related to the materials and the documentation. However, I didn't see, I know it was a pretty high-level document, but I didn't see any reference to accessibility in terms of the description of the work they're going to be doing. Could you maybe expand on the components of the plan related to accessibility? Thank you.
Through the mayor, thank you, Councillor, again for the question. Our entire approach to this is around accessibility in terms of engaging with groups who may not always have felt that there was a place for them at the table, or who may not necessarily have been invited. So we're talking about an accessibility of an approach in terms of engagement, information gathering, reporting, and accessing arts and culture generally and activities across our community. So we're looking for broad audience appeal. We're looking for that welcoming piece for all sorts of groups. So not those living with disabilities, but people who are also maybe coming from different cultural backgrounds as well. So I would say accessibility is implicit in terms of the work we're doing. But I will add that both ERA and Monumental, and specifically Monumental in the work that they have done in other municipalities, really their level of engagement is, I haven't seen a whole lot of it in terms of comparisons, in as much as their approach is about engaging groups who are typically not included in these conversations. And really that is the thrust of what we're trying to do here with the cultural plan. Obviously there are base things that we know we need to achieve, but the engagement, the accessibility, all those pieces I think are implicit and certainly front of mind for us.
That would be great. And maybe when the time comes, if you wouldn't mind just shipping that to the chair of our accessibility committee to circulate, that would be great. I would appreciate that. And last but not least, I know whenever we talk about master plans for our community, and I know this happened with the last cultural plan as well, often we get a lot of great work done and a lot of great engagement with our community and a lot of great recommendations, and then we sometimes hit a wall. And it's not a Chatham-Kent municipal unique to us. It is often where we end up, especially in challenging economic times and budget fiscal restraint. So what happens, it looks like January 2026 approximately we would see this report back. Is there any additional funding set aside to actually implement the recommendations that we're going to see in the plan? Thank you.
Through the Mayor, again, Councillor Story, thank you for the question. I mean, I don't want to predicate what actually might be recommended or not recommended in the actual cultural plan. It may or may not involve requirement of financial resources or otherwise, I don't know, so I wouldn't like to predicate that. But we certainly do have some reserves in terms of our Kiwanis Theatre Improvement Fund. There are still some reserves there. And we do have some reserves in our capital budget. But ultimately, it will be a council decision when we return with the recommendations that the consultant brings forward. Then it will be a council decision to decide what level of investment is required moving forward and balancing that thing against our asset management plan and the requirements generally that have already been identified as needs across all of our, well, all municipal facilities ultimately.
Thank you, Audrey. And sorry, I have one last quick question, maybe that would be a financial one to Gord. If we saw that report in 2026, would we potentially say, okay, if there's X, Y, and Z financial components to it, would we say we would look at that at 2026 budget, for example? Is that how that would work, generally speaking?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So with the timing, your 2026 budget, you'll be deliberating in November of 2025. So it's really more likely either the 2027 budget with the next council or in the 28 to 31 multi-year budget.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks, Audrey, for the report.
Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
Councillor B. McGregor?
Yes.
All votes are in. Motion passes 17-0. 14G, Tender Award Contract T25-231, King Street West Reconstruction and First Street Water Main Replacement, Community of Chatham.
Councillor Story and Councillor B. McGregor, can I get you to put this on the floor, please?
Happy to move, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Story, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just had a couple of questions that came in from residents in that neighborhood that I thought might be helpful to discuss on the floor, so anyone else listening might be aware who lives in that area. First question is, I know there's a reference to the street light replacement. Those particular street lights are similar to other historic neighborhoods on Victoria and Elwood, I think. So I just wanted to clarify, could you give us a little more information about what that replacement looks like on that section of King Street? Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. So, excuse me, the streetlights that are being replaced, they're to meet standards, an RP8 standard, and also improve some of the street lighting levels on King Street. So the style that's being incorporated is similar to the style that you'd see at downtown Chatham right now on King Street. So we're trying to match those. Additionally, some of those older lights are harder to replace. Some of the parts are difficult to source. So Public Works has been trying to make an initiative to try to standardize some of those decorative streetlights.
Okay, I might add that to an amendment to this. I think there's going to be some public pushback on that, just because those particular items are quite beloved in our community and they're a really unique historic element to the neighborhood. So I'm wondering if we might be able to pull that piece out of this for a little more investigation. I think we have done replacement on Victoria with those lights to a reasonable degree recently, but I know Councillor Bondi might have more familiarity with that, so I will leave that for the moment. But will there be any impacts on the water supply or the water pressure for residents in the area? Thank you.
So during construction, residents may see some fluctuations in pressure. They would also have short-term outages when we're replacing the services over to the new main. But long-term project completion, there'd be no loss of water pressure in the area.
Okay, and then in terms of the easements along King, I know there were a few driveways that were impacted. And according to residents in that area, there's not a lot of parking off-site in terms of First Street. It's usually quite busy. So if there are issues with getting in and out of driveways, do you have any suggestions for those residents who might be impacted by that? Thank you.
During construction or after?
During, yeah, thank you. Well, I guess there's two pieces. I'm not entirely clear on which driveways we're referring to, but I know there were a few folks on the street who thought they may not be able to get in and out of their driveway. So I would assume that's probably during the actual construction. Thank you.
Yeah, so during construction, our contractors are required to keep access open to the public. There would be times during construction when, if we're replacing a curb across a driveway or a sidewalk, that they would lose access. Typically, when we're doing these projects, we do one side of the road with curbs and sidewalks, and then we flip to the other side, so that the residents that lose access can park on the opposite side of the road. But we also work with the commercial properties if there's businesses for access and deliveries and that sort of thing as well.
Okay, and sir, so maybe, will you be letting residents know sort of directly, not too long before that happens on their particular property, so they'll be aware of when that is, so if they do need to make other arrangements, they can do so?
Yeah, so we will keep the public informed. We will be installing or dropping off door hangers before the project starts to inform them of the phasing of the project and which areas will be impacted at which times. Our contractor also provides a letter informing them of the construction project, and we provide contact information if there's any questions or any concerns. And then they can typically work with the on-site supervisor or inspector at that time if there's specific access requirements through the duration of construction.
Okay, that's great. And just the last question, I know in the report it said summer 2025 that would likely begin. Do we have a little more firm of a date now of when that's going to start? Thank you.
I'm anticipating likely in August, early August, that it would start. Once this is approved at council here, and then we have a time to meet with the contractor, we'll get a better idea of their schedule. We typically set up pre-construction meetings shortly after our council meeting to discuss the details of the project.
Okay, thanks very much. Mr. Chair, I'm not sure what the proper timing is for this, but can I add an item number 4 on this, or is that at the end of the discussion? Thank you. Okay, can I simply add review options to keep the historic light posts as part of the replacement? I don't want to keep it too, I want staff to be able to provide us with some options on that. I don't want to make it too specific, but can we review the historic lamp post replacement option? Maybe that's a proper wording.
The tender, how does that sit with the, is it already been awarded and is this an adjustment? Like, or what phase are we at there?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Ed Rosoldo, General Manager of Infrastructure Engineering. So what you have before you tonight is to approve the tender. The historic street lighting is not included as part of that tender. So that motion would have us go back, and if there was a change, if that change couldn't be accommodated within the contingency, we'd have to come back and ask for additional potentially funds to make that change.
Okay, so it's feasible to do that then, okay. So item 4, just those few simple words, do we get those? Councillor B. McGregor, are you okay with this change?
Yes.
Okay. I've got a couple other speakers, Councillor C. McGregor and Councillor Bondi and Councillor Scotchy now, okay.
Thank you, and through the mayor. Mark, could you just better explain to me the amendment on the amount of $101,700 for the contract administration inspection services to be approved? I see that they did inspections back in 2019. Do we have to redo those because of the amount of time since the last inspection, which leads to the amendment in the contract? If you could just better explain that to me, appreciate it.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Yeah, so the contract amendment is to cover inspection services through construction. So when we originally RFP'd this project, the phasing was a little bit different. We're phasing into almost kind of two separate projects now. So there's some additional funds required for inspection and contract administration, but also just the extending it into 2026 to cover some of the increased costs for that as well.
Thank you.
Councillor Bondi, followed by Councillor Scotchy.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I'd like to discuss number 4, like the amendment. So I think the way I'm reading it, administration would review the options for historical lamp post replacement options, which means we'll never hear about it, right? You guys will just decide, like, if this would be a friendly, could we just make an amendment that the original style stays? And I don't think there's any trouble finding these, because it's less than 5 years that they replaced the light standards from, I think, Amelia to McNaughton on Victoria. So they got to be out there. And they change the lights on Victoria from time to time. So there's, like, the availability is there. It's just, it really would be a shame to take these out, because it's just kind of a unique thing, right? Like, there's only 3 streets that have them. And I think the people that live there and the people that travel will just think, you know, what a shame. Like, it's not the end of the world, but I'm sure they'll just kind of wonder, like, why would you do that? Like, and clearly they are available. Like, the ones on Victoria are, again, not that old. So how much trouble would it be to, you know, just have them stay?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. So, yeah, if I recall, the Victoria Ave, that was similar in that it was a council direction to replace the existing lights. We didn't do any work, I guess, on the existing lights. We extended the street lights down the road, and we tried to match as closely as possible. Mm-hmm. In this instance, we were matching with the existing lights on King Street in the downtown area. We did have a PIC, a public information center. We provided door hangers to all the residents, and we did share that the street lighting was going to be adjusted. We didn't receive any comments, but it's not to say that there's.
How many people came out to that, do you know?
It was a virtual PIC, so we provided door hangers to every resident, and then there was information online.
Right, okay. Okay, well, that's fine. But I do think the people that live there would probably prefer to have them stay. I think if I went door to door and asked everybody, they'd probably, because really it's been, you know, they've been that way for 100 years, right?
Yeah, so similar to what Edward mentioned, we can look into if there's replacement lights. If the question is, can we keep the exact lights? I'd have to take a look at the drawings just to make sure that there's no infrastructure that's going to impact, that we'd have to remove them in order to replace some of the infrastructure. But we can definitely investigate that.
So will we know about it, or will you guys just make that decision and not tell us, but not tell us? I don't expect you to tell us when you choose, you know, lawnmowers and stuff, but, you know, like, will we hear about it? Because it is an amendment, but I see that you can just kind of run through the amendment and kind of not come back to us on it. I know it sounds nitpicky, but it is kind of a cool thing that people like, and if it's not that much trouble, you know, you're going to exchange the standards anyway to match downtown, which I don't think is terribly important because that's a commercial downtown area and this is a residential area, so I don't know, they really should match downtown Chatham, but I don't know if it's that big of a deal, then I guess it's not going to happen. But, you know, I'm just trying to get that kind of across. So is it that big of a deal? Like, I don't think you'll be able to use the old lights. I would imagine they're probably too old. But, you know, you're going to put in new lights, so rather than put in the new style that's in downtown, just put in the style that's existing there.
Yeah, so again, the Victoria Ave, I believe we matched the lights as closely as we could. You couldn't actually replace lights with the exact same style of that older historic
And you did a great job. They look, nobody will ever know. It's very uniform when you drive down. Because I live, obviously, on Victoria, right? Not obviously, but I do live on Victoria. And so mine's an old one, and it's pretty seamless, right? Like, you can't tell. I think the new ones are taller. But other than that, it's a very good match, so I'm sure that would be just fine on King West if that's doable. Like, I don't think it's a huge ask, right? Like,
No, I think I guess I would say that maybe the recommendation should be adjusted a little more specifically than to just utilize those.
Sorry,
funds.
can I interject here just to say administration review options, historic lamp post replacement options, and report back to council? Because I think, Councillor Bondi, that's what you're afraid of, is that it's just gonna, we're never gonna hear again. But if we put that in there, they will report back and say, here's the options, and we can look at it then.
that would be
does that work?
great. Thank
All
you
right.
very much, Mr. Mayor. Okay, I'm all done. Thanks. Sorry to bug you about this, but you know.
Is that okay with you, Councillor Story?
That's great, although, yeah, I think we can take out one of the word options, but other than
Okay.
that, that's great, thank you.
And Councillor B. McGregor?
Yes.
Councillor Scotchy?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. No disrespect to your interpretation, I just wanted to make sure with Edward, I interpreted number 4 a little bit more difficult than that. Is it an easy process, Edward, or is it a difficult process? Because I thought the way you sounded that there would be potentially more work or delay if this was the process, so I just want to clarify that this is easy or not.
Thank you, through the mayor. The replacement of the streetlights is not going to be in the first phase of the project, right? So we have to do the underground and other things. So we can take this back and we can review the various options. We'll come back with the rationale of why we chose what we did, because we did recommend not this option. And we can look at the other options and provide council with the cost implications of making that change, hopefully within the time frame before we need to install them.
Thank you. Just one quick question to the clerk. I would just appreciate 1 through 3 as together and number 4 separately, please.
Will do, thank you.
Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote. We're going to vote on item 1, 2, and 3 to start, and then we'll vote on item 4.
Councillor B. McGregor?
Yes.
All votes are in, motion passes 16-0. And now we'll move on to number 4. Councillor B. McGregor?
Yes.
All votes are in, motion passes 13-3.
Item 15, Chief Administrative Office.
15A, Chatham-Kent Population Growth, the 2025 update, and I'll have Audrey come forward for the introduction.
Through the mayor. You are going to receive 2 interrelated presentations this evening. One is about what's been happening with Chatham-Kent's population, and the other is about what has been happening with Chatham-Kent's workforce. So as you can imagine, both very important to understand. For the population presentation, you're going to hear from Jason Stubbits, who is our Municipal Coordinator of Workforce Planning and Research. Obviously, changes in population are important to understand what's actually driving those and what's making them up. And then, of course, as we plan for growth and changes and attracting talent to our community. The other presentation, as I said, is about workforce. It's related to our Chatham-Kent Workforce Planning Board, which is funded by the Ministry of Labour, Immigration, Training and Skills Development. You are then going to hear from David Campbell, who is consultant who is hired to complete the Workforce Planning Board's annual local labour market impact or local labour market planning document. David Campbell from Jupia, and he is going to showcase some of the sectors that are growing and in need of talent due to both growth and retirements. And I think really, in summary, Chatham-Kent has always been known as a geographic sweet spot. And I think now we're obviously identified as a relocation hotspot as well. And so some of the data that Jason will share with you will strongly illustrate that. So we'll leave you with Jason Stubbits for a presentation.
All right. Good evening, Mayor Caniff and Council. As Audrey alluded to, I'm here this evening to provide an update on population growth in Chatham-Kent. So as Audrey alluded to with my role, Workforce Planning and Research Coordinator, my role helps support our local talent attraction and retention efforts by ensuring that employers, stakeholders, job seekers, and policymakers have access to the labor market data that they need to make informed decisions. So jumping into the population update, as of July 1st, 2024, Chatham-Kent's population is estimated to be 111,703. This population level was last seen in 2006. So Statistics Canada produces the census every 5 years, with 2021 being the most recent. But Statistics Canada also provides population estimates on an annual basis that allows us to see population trends in between those census periods, and that's where this information comes from. So looking at the population growth, if you look at the chart on the screen here, Chatham-Kent's population was just over 112,000 people back in 2006. If you look at the 9-year period that followed that, there was consistent decline in the population, with it eventually going down to 104,511 people back in 2015. However, that's when we begin to see these population trends change and we begin to see that upward growth. So between 2015 and 2024, Chatham-Kent's population grew by an estimated 7,192 people, or almost 7%. And in the last year alone, the population increased by an estimated 1,176 people. So I think it's important to also note that since 2001, when this data collection set began, Chatham-Kent's population has only been higher than what it currently is 3 times. And that was back in 2001, 2005, and 2006. And currently, Chatham-Kent's population is only 577 people away from surpassing its highest level since data collection began back in 2001. So if we look at the age breakdown of the population, a few noticeable trends stand out. First, almost 24% of Chatham-Kent residents are over the age of 65. So again, this really highlights the importance of continued attraction and retention efforts, especially of younger residents, to address future workforce shortages that the next presentation will allude to. Second, between 2023 and 2024, Chatham-Kent's population in that 25 to 44 age group saw growth of 2.2%. So again, a positive sign for local workforce development. And then if you did the math on the screen there, I should note that 21% of Chatham-Kent's population, again, based on these estimates, is under the age of 20, so a positive sign for the future workforce. So the decline in the natural population growth rate highlights the need for population growth from other sources. So if we look at Chatham-Kent's declining birth rate, prior to 2013, Chatham-Kent saw more births than deaths on an annual basis. And you see that with this chart on the screen here, with the number of births highlighted by the blue line and the number of deaths highlighted by the gray line. However, starting in 2014, the number of deaths began to outpace the number of births. It's a trend that's continued to present day, and as you see on the chart there, it's actually widened as time has gone on. So given the current age distribution of the population that we just looked at, it's also a trend that is likely to continue in the future. In 2024 alone, there were 462 more deaths than births in the community. So what that tells us is Chatham-Kent needs to continue to attract and retain individuals from other sources to continue to grow its population. So immigrants and non-permanent residents continue to play a key role in driving population and workforce growth in Chatham-Kent. So on this slide, we see the number of annual immigrants and net non-permanent resident arrivals to Chatham-Kent. One of the most noticeable trends is since the pandemic, we see strong increases in the number of annual arrivals from both of these population sources. And you see that on the screen there with the number of immigrants highlighted by the gray bar and net non-permanent residents by the blue bar. So between July 1st, 2023 and June 30th of 2024, so over that 1-year period, 293 immigrants arrived to Chatham-Kent and a net of 489 non-permanent residents arrived. In recent years, intra-provincial migration, so movement within the province of Ontario, has been the main source of population growth in Chatham-Kent. So it was just a decade ago that Chatham-Kent had negative trends when it comes to intra-provincial migration, meaning the community was losing more people to other areas of the province than it was gaining. And you see that clearly on the screen there. However, starting in 2016, this trend started to change, and again, it has sharply accelerated after the pandemic. In 2024, 1,077 more people moved into Chatham-Kent than out from other areas of the province. And in the past 4 years, Chatham-Kent has gained 4,561 people via intra-provincial migration. So you see strong growth from other people choosing to come to Chatham-Kent from elsewhere in the province. Continuing with intra-provincial migration, what we see with these trends is that there's considerable mobility within southwestern Ontario. So this data comes from a 1-year period of 2022 and 2023. But what Chatham-Kent saw was a net gain of 374 people from Toronto, a net gain of 148 from Windsor, a net gain of 125 from Kitchener, Cambridge, Waterloo, and a net gain of 119 from Hamilton. Sarnia is actually one of the few areas in the province where we have a negative net number, but it is quite low with just negative net 13. So again, you're seeing Chatham-Kent gain more individuals from other areas of the province than we're losing. So age data suggests that it's young families moving to the community. So we looked at the number of immigrants, intra-provincial migrants, as well as non-permanent residents. But what their age is telling us is that a large percentage of arrivals are coming in the under 15 age group and the 25 to 44 age group. So of the 1,859 people that moved to Chatham-Kent in this 1-year period via these 3 pathways, 74% were under the age of 45. So this includes 92% of immigrant and 96% of net non-permanent resident arrivals being under the age of 45. So in summary, when it comes to the population, Chatham-Kent has seen consistent growth since 2015. The community continues to see a declining natural birth rate, which highlights the need for population growth from other sources. And that leads to our attraction from inward migration. So those moving from elsewhere within the province of Ontario, so intra-provincial migrants, as well as non-permanent residents and immigrants, they continue to be the main drivers of population growth in Chatham-Kent. So that's it, what I have for the population portion of it. And I know that the next presentation will look at workforce trends.
Councillor Crew, followed by Councillor Story.
Thank you, Jason. I just have one question of clarification.
Yep.
How do you describe a non-permanent resident?
Through you, Mayor. So a non-permanent resident would be someone on a work visa, a study visa, or a refugee claimant, so an asylum seeker. So international students would be included in that.
Councillor Story, followed by Councillor C. McGregor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Jason, for that great presentation. I really appreciate you gathering this data for us and sharing with us periodically. I think it's really helpful for us to see. And interesting, how long it took us to rebound from that economic shock earlier in the 2000s. But I really appreciate the work that our attraction and retention team have done and our local businesses to bring folks back to the community and to grow our economy again. In terms of comparators, do we know how we line up in terms of, if I'm reading it correctly, about 2-ish% population growth every 5 years? Is that typical for municipalities our size? Are we a little higher on that front or a little lower? Where do we fall within that range? Thank you.
Through the Mayor, thank you for the question, Councillor. So we're working on a report right now that will look at comparators with other areas across the province, our size. So I do know over the last 5-year period when the census, Chatham-Kent saw a 2.2% population growth, whereas the province saw a 5.8% population growth. Looking at different areas within the province, there is kind of a lot of mix of some communities growing faster than others and slower. I think the census period before, Chatham-Kent saw a population decline, so it was positive that we did see that 2.2% increase. But I will share that report when it's available.
That would be great, thank you. And then the last question would be, I know you referred to, in order for us to continue to grow, since we have an aging community, we would likely be continuing to prioritize immigrants and non-permanent residents to come to Chatham-Kent. I think since the last census was complete, we have had a change fairly recently in federal immigration policy that could potentially restrict those numbers to the country, not just to Chatham-Kent, quite substantially. Have we considered that new policy development in our forecasting? Thank you.
Through the mayor, thank you for that question. So yes, the stats that you would have saw up there would not have accounted for the recent policy changes from the federal government. There probably will be some impacts, but I think it's too early to know exactly what the impacts will be. Probably non-permanent residents, which would include international students, would see some lower enrollment numbers locally as probably one impact. But a lot of Chatham-Kent's population growth that we looked at is coming from intra-provincial migrants. So people who are already in the province of Ontario, could have been here for 6 months, 5 years, 10 years, or more, coming to the province, or coming to the community. So I'm not sure of the actual impact that the policy might have on that migration trend.
Thank you very much.
Councillor C. McGregor, followed by Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, and through the mayor, just a couple of questions. The non-permanent residents, are they included in the overall population tally?
Through the mayor, could you please repeat the question, sorry?
The non-resident or non-permanent
Yep.
residents that we saw numbers there, are they included in the overall population?
Yes, they would be.
Like even if they're on a student visa and they're only projected to be here for?
In those estimates, they would be included in those.
So they might
wages.
not really be turned into permanent residents?
Correct.
Correct?
A non-permanent resident, yeah, there's no guarantee that they would stay in the country. Correct.
Okay,
Or in
okay.
the community as well.
And when you're doing these studies, do you tally at all, when you talk about interprovincial people moving into Chatham-Kent, whether or not they're returning members that may be left during the time that we lost so many people that were leaving to find new jobs? Do we track how many of those are returning members from the past?
So through this data set, we wouldn't be able to get that answer. You wouldn't be able to see if that specific individual left the community and then came back. Through the work of resident attraction and retention with the municipality, they do connect with people who have left the community and come back and tell their story. But as for the actual figures through this data set, there'd be no way of tracking one individual who left and decided to come back.
Yeah, I remember in the decline, a lot of people leaving and moving west for jobs, but had family here that have since, had families and decided to return. So I was just curious as whether that was tracked. So thank you.
Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for this presentation. I'm just trying to understand, I definitely see the need for having more people. My question is more related to the types of people. What have we seen as far as economically, how this has improved for Chatham-Kent? Or how has this, what are our unemployment rates, let's say, compared to when our rates, when we had a much less population? Are they fulfilling jobs that we have that haven't been able to be fulfilled? Are we seeing an improvement because we have all these, immigration coming to us? Is that value here?
Through the mayor, thank you for the question. We're definitely seeing a lot more diversity in the community. immigrants who are coming are bringing, skilled education with them. You really see that in the education trends. But the following presentation that's coming up next is going to do the deeper dive into employment trends, unemployment trends. So we'll see that coming up. Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to the next presentation then. It's the Jason's show.
Next presentation is Chatham-Kent Workplace Planning Board 2025 update, and we have a presentation from David Campbell, and he is on the call. David, are you there?
I'm there. Can you hear me?
Yes, and we can see you on the video in front of us. Thank you. Go ahead. Oh, now we can't hear you. No. We still can't hear you. I can hear a little bit of the echoing. I don't know if you want to turn off your camera and maybe try if that might help. I'm not sure. We still cannot hear you. We can see your presentation. David, we still cannot hear you. You were there at the very beginning, and then it stopped working. See your message, one sec. It's an internet issue. Okay, why don't we try that quickly, David, and see if you go back out and come back in and see if that works. Hi, David, I can see you again. Do you want to try your microphone? Nope, I can see you talking, but we cannot hear you. So I've talked with Audrey, and unfortunately, if we can't get you to hear you, we'll just have to move on, and perhaps you can connect with Audrey about next steps. Is that okay? We're not having much luck when we have you on the virtual call, are we? Okay, no problem. I see your apology. Thank you.
Yes, we'll move on to item 16, Finance, Budget, Information, Technology, and Transformation.
16A, Public Utilities Commission Master Plan Review with a Growth Lens. We have a presentation from Jim Harnum. He's the president of the Municipal VU Consulting, Inc. Jim, if you'd like to come forward and give a brief introduction and start, we hope that you have better luck. The microphone's in front of you if you just want to push the button until the red light comes on. Perfect.
Get this up for a sec. Great. Well, good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. Thank you for allowing me to be here to present this evening. Here to present to you the results of a study that we were commissioned to do for the, do we have a presentation up there? I can plug in here. Okay, thanks. Thank you. We were commissioned by the PUC to look at their water wastewater master plan. So you may or may not be aware that the PUC hired a consulting firm to do a master plan, came up with close to $1 billion worth of projects, and quite a bit of a sticker shock for this community. So they'd asked us to look at that and try and prioritize and see what could we do to really make this more affordable. Go to the next slide, please. I'm just going to start my presentation here so I'm on the same slide. There we go. Okay, can't quite see the bottom part of this. There we go, thank you. So really what they asked us to do was to optimize the infrastructure investment priorities and support the long-term service delivery and encourage growth in the community. So there was about 4 objectives that we were to look at, and it was to review the master plan and other key documentation. They wanted us to develop an actionable recommendation plan that observed risks and tried to balance those risks with growth and levels of service. Identify constraints and risks and opportunities while we're going through this exercise. And then lastly, develop a high-level alternatives and potential phasing options for the master plan. Next slide. So when we started this project, these were some of the discussions we had not only with Chatham-Kent staff, but also with the PUC staff. And some of these challenges started to come to the surface. The first was the obvious, that the master plan capital forecasts were unaffordable. Next was the water wastewater facilities were really having competing priorities between the state of good repair and the potential growth that the community is facing. Next, we have, over the last while in Chatham-Kent, you've had limited growth, as you're probably well aware, but with the things changing at the province and the housing shortage, growth has been accelerating in Chatham-Kent, and there's estimates of 1% growth in the short term for this community, which it hasn't seen for quite some time. Wallaceburg costs were continuing to escalate, not just the capital cost, but the actual scope of the project was escalating. And all capital projects are escalating, as you're well aware, and you see many times through reports that come before you. Agricultural greenhouse demands and DC discounts were not sustainable. So there was a huge demand or projected demand of greenhouses between Dresden and Wallaceburg, as well as closer to the south end of Chatham-Kent. And right now, those greenhouses were also discounted under the DC bylaw. So that wasn't something that was sustainable. And there happened to be some disconnects between the PUC and the municipal staff when it came to what were the priorities and what was the main priority going forward. And then lastly, we felt that there were some resource opportunities that were not fully utilized. And what that means is we think that there was opportunities to do things better, cheaper, faster, and prioritize some of these things. And that's what we ended up looking at through this project. Next slide, please. So I won't spend a lot of time on this, but just to demonstrate to you that we did follow a very extensive process when we went through this project. We started with a discovery phase. And we looked at having a kickoff meeting not only with the PUC staff, but also with the Chatham-Kent staff. We basically reviewed every document that we could get our hands on, data, information about the treatment plants, the projects, the history. There's numerous reports that are giving you a snapshot of what's happening in Chatham-Kent. We reviewed all of that. We did interview the mayor and some of the PUC board members, as well as numerous Chatham-Kent staff and PUC staff. Next, we went into our diagnosis phase, and we looked at benchmarking some other municipalities that are similar size to yourself, We went through a visioning workshop with the PUC staff and the Chatham-Kent staff. We reviewed the constraints and opportunities. What were some of the opportunities that were presenting themselves through this? And then we produced a current state assessment. And lastly, we went into the phase 3, which is the options development, and we came up with a prioritization framework and looked at the financial analysis of the potential solutions. And then again, we workshopped this with the PUC staff and with the Chatham-Kent staff. And then we produced a final report, and we're here today to present that report to you. Next slide. So really, this diagram here shows you when we were originally brought on, our focus was to look at the master plan projects, water and wastewater master plan projects. But as we started reading, as we started going more through the documentation and having more discussions with staff in both Chatham-Kent and the PUC, we realized there was a lot more below the tip of the iceberg. So what we've organized this report in is these categories. And really what we have is the water wastewater master plan projects are just a list of projects, but below that we have a whole bunch of EAs. 3 main ones that we want to talk about in this report, or we do talk about, is the Wallaceburg EA, the Southeast Chatham EA, and the Southwest Chatham EA. And then below that you have a lot of operational studies that some are there and some aren't there, but they're really help you. The Class EAs and the master plan are your long-term studies, but your short-term studies, operational studies like plant building condition assessments, water loss studies, and I&I, or inflow and infiltration studies. We want to talk a little bit about those. Lastly, we have foundational plans, and those are your big plans like asset management plans, the rate study, water and wastewater rate study, the official plan itself, and then the master plan itself, not the projects, but the master plan itself is one of those foundational plans. And then below all of that is really the need for a strategic business plan and having levels of service defined and key performance indicators. So I'm going to go through these very quickly, these various parts that we discovered in our work with the PUC. So the master plan's the next slide. We divided the master plan projects. There was numerous projects that added up to about $985 million. And we divided these projects up into green, yellow, and red. The green projects being projects that, the green projects were projects that we deemed were ready to proceed, and they didn't need any further study, and they were a priority for the municipality and for Chatham, or the PUC. I'll get into the other ones in a minute. We then went through yellow projects, which are projects that we feel could proceed, but they needed further investigation. And then lastly, red category were projects that should be halted and further study on those projects needed to happen. It may be a completely different solution, and Wallaceburg will be one of those that we'll talk about quite a bit. So in this slide, you'll see we have approximately $94 million worth of projects out of the $985 million that we're saying we should go ahead with for various reasons. They're either critical for water security or pressures or state of good repair for infrastructure, and they're ready to go, and they will add benefit to the community and the PUC. You'll see also that a lot of these are in the short term and the interim, so in the 1 to 5 to 7 year time frame, and a lot of these projects do take that long to carry out. Next slide. So this is the yellow projects, and this is the ones that we've said, to refresh your memory, is to pause until further investigation, but they probably will proceed at some point in the future. Again, you start to see a shift now that these are shifting more into the medium to long term. So we're really not, by halting them and doing more investigation, we're not holding up a lot of the work that is planned, but we do feel that there's further studies and further things that are required before we commit these dollars and get moving on these dollars. Next slide. And you'll have these packages, I'm assuming, so you can read the projects. I won't go through all the projects. And the next slide is really stop, halt these projects, and do some studies, and they may actually yield different solutions altogether. So it may not be the solution that was put forward in the master plan itself. And again, you'll see these are, they're into the short and medium long term, and a couple of those biggest numbers are the Wallaceburg supply system, but also the Chatham water supply system. And then there is about $225 million identified for combined sewer separation. And we'll talk about some of these projects in a minute as well when we get into the EAs and the operational studies. But we're saying there's $593 million worth of projects, or almost half of the projects, that you should halt, because we think that there's probably a better solution, or there may be a better solution than going ahead with these projects, or a different solution at the very least. Next project, or next slide, sorry. The project's on my mind. So the next part of this is really the Class EAs. The next slide. So the main one we want to talk about today is the Wallaceburg EA, and this accounts for over $150 million worth of the projects that we're talking about halting or recommending to halt. And I want to give you a little bit of background on the Wallaceburg EA. Back in 2012, this has been going on, as many of you been around this table probably know that. This has been going on for quite some time with Wallaceburg. Back in 2012, a company called Dillon was hired to do an EA, and their recommendation was to bring a pipe from Chatham to Wallaceburg. In 2016, a second study was done by a company called Stantec. They're a well-known engineering firm, and they also came up with a preferred option, being 3A, in their study of a pipe. And then there was quite a bit of pushback from the community and quite a bit of discomfort with this idea of a pipe coming from Chatham. They like their water supply that they have, and so there was an amendment made to that, and they landed on upgrading the Wallace treatment plant. Not replacing it, but upgrading it, and fixing the things that are wrong with it. And that, the pipe option was about $11.9 million at the time, and that's probably upwards of $25 million in today's dollars. Then there was also Jacobs, who did an EA, and then they identified upgrading the existing Wallaceburg, and it would be roughly $26 million and an additional $10 million for the total upgrade of that, which was about $36 million for that study. Then we come to 2023, and again, the same company, Jacobs, does an EA, and now with the existing plant is about 14 megaliters per day. That, along with the projected demand of these greenhouses, was going to bring this plant to a 28 megaliter a day plant. It was going to completely replace the plant, build a new intake, build a new reservoir, a low lift pumping station, and also new treatment facilities as well. And that was pegged at about $117 million, and now that cost has been inflated. It's sitting at about $150 million, and that cost is probably closer to $200 million by the time you build this plant. So our recommendation on Wallaceburg, the next slide please, is to really repair the existing immediate concerns at Wallaceburg. There are some things that need immediate attention in the Wallaceburg plant that have pretty well been on hold until nothing that's affecting the water quality or safety, but they've been on hold with all of these studies that have been going on. So we're suggesting that we get those repairs done and get some things fixed at the Wallaceburg plant. There has been a lot of talk about the EA rules changing in the near future and really loosening requirements. You're hearing about some of these things in the media. And really, we're saying that you should be looking at utilizing the existing you could use the existing Wallaceburg plant for these greenhouses alone, and they would pay the entire amount. If you separate the water and say greenhouses don't need treated water. Greenhouses prefer raw water. They actually take the chlorine out of the water when they use that water. So there is an option to take that existing Wallaceburg plant and make it a raw water pumping station to supply the greenhouses. It would be for the sole purpose of greenhouses, so they would be the sole benefactor, therefore they would pay for that 100% and not the residents of Chatham-Kent. A fallback position of that would be to just upgrade the plant, the existing 14 megaliter a day plant that's there, upgrade it. And again, the costs that were in the 2022 EA were 26 million and 10 million, but obviously those have also inflated, and there's a bunch of other things that the PUC recognizes in the Wallaceburg plant. So really, it's depending on the EA timing. We feel that you should carry out with that original plan of running a pipe from Chatham-Kent, or from Chatham, I should say, to Wallaceburg, and plan the plant expansion of Wallaceburg, or of Chatham, I should say, in conjunction with that pipe. So you have to do some work to Chatham anyway for growth and for the future of Chatham. So make that plant bigger. You've already got the property and the footprint, and run the pipe up to Wallaceburg. And I'll talk a bit more about that in some of the coming slides. Next slide. So the second one that I wanted to talk about is called the Chatham Southeast EA, and this is really about Ridgetown and Blenheim. The problem we have here, we're recommending that this carry on and this go ahead. The Ridgetown Highgate groundwater supply has difficulty producing aesthetically pleasing water. So it's safe water, but it's not always aesthetically pleasing. As well, there's about a 56-year-old reservoir and 55-year-old pipes and elevated tank in that area that are going to need replacing or upgrading. So rather than do that, there's a plan to bring that water across from the South Chatham-Kent water transmission system with a 600 millimeter pipe from the Charing Cross Road, and that would eliminate this system. And same with the Wallaceburg plant. We would be eliminating a plant which has a lot of operational costs in it. There's chemicals, there's employees, there's power, all of those things that we need to think about, not just the capital cost. There's a long-term operating cost that I'll talk about a bit further as well. Next slide. So lastly is the Southwest Chatham Growth and Servicing Study. This area has the potential for needed industrial, commercial, and housing in the area. It's partly outside the urban boundary right now, but it is an important growth area. A lot of it is in the urban boundary, but a part of it is outside the urban boundary. The servicing study was started on this before the master plan, and it was halted, hoping the two of them would come together. That wasn't the case. There was nothing considered for this area in the PUC's water wastewater master plan. And it's likely that the next official plan will include some, if not a good portion of these lands. There has been a great deal of ongoing communication with the PUC and the Chatham-Kent staff on this area now. And, but there is potentially upwards of $500 million in water wastewater alone that's required for the full build out of this area. The next slide. So next we have operational studies. So we've got, next slide please. We've got a bunch of things that we feel the PUC should, so this started to go a little bit over and above what our original scope was with respect to just prioritizing the capital programs. But as we're going through these, we're seeing some of these issues. And so we made some recommendations on this as well. We think that the PUC should immediately begin detailed condition assessments of all the pumping stations and treatment facilities. They do building condition assessments, but from staff resources, not only in the PUC, but also in Chatham, you know, it's difficult to get those assessments done. We feel that you should do a 10-year program and get all of those facilities. You need to know the status of those facilities. You need to know what shape they're in. How much money is it going to be to fix them and keep them in a state of good repair? And these building condition assessments are critical to ensuring that you're also managing the growth and the state of good repair together. So if you know the condition of the facility, you will say, okay, let's not replace that facility because growth, we're going to build something for growth. So you have the two of them that are aligned. Next slide. The next operational study that we're recommending is I&I studies and water loss studies. We've got anywhere from 15 to 55% water loss in the PUC system. So that means if you produce 100 liters of water, 55% of that in some areas is being lost. So you're only actually pumping out 45 liters, and the other 55% of that water is being lost somewhere. There's a bunch of different reasons. There's firefighting, there's operational flushing. You've got a lot of dead ends, a lot of small 2- and 4-inch mains in the system, but you also have leakage. So we're recommending that you do an I&I study and find out where that water is going. It's much more economical to find water that's already being produced and lost than it is to expand a plant for tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. You may spend $10 million finding these leaks and improving your operations. So it makes more sense to do these studies. On the flip side is the sewers. So the sewers have I&I, or inflow and infiltration, and that water comes into the sewers, and it's not supposed to come into the sewers. So you have a combined sewer system where the water is supposed to come into the sewers, but you also have I&I, which is water that's not supposed to come into the sewers. And that, you've got about $25 million in the master plan for upgrading some of those pipes and making them bigger so that we don't end up with flooding. And we're suggesting that you would be better to find some of these leaks and how is the water getting into that system, so that it's a better bang for your buck than just upsizing pipes to deal with water that shouldn't be there. So again, the last point there is the return on investment for water loss and I&I are much higher compared to upsizing or building more treatment capacity. Next slide. Thank you. So the last one is there's about $225 million identified in the master plan for sewer separations over the next 10 years. And our recommendation, you've got an engineering firm that I've worked with over my career as well, Andrews Engineering, excellent firm. They've come up with all of these plans to do sewer separation, but there's no real concrete plan. And there's a combination between the Chatham-Kent staff and the PUC staff that are responsible for this. But really, we're saying you don't have to. There's a guide called F55 guidelines that say you can manage this flow. You don't have to separate everything if it's not affordable. So we're saying take a pause on this $225 million. You still have projects going forward that are sewer separations when you're rebuilding a road, and we heard some of those the last time we were here. But it's really come up with a solid 10-year plan. Right now, that's just a big chunk placeholder that's in your master plan that says somewhere around $225 million we need. So we're saying get a better, more concrete plan for that $225 million. Next slide, one more. So then you have, below that, you have foundational plans, and this is your official plan, and then your municipal DC bylaw. The municipal DC bylaw is set to expire in 2027, so there's an urgency here to get a lot of these things figured out and costed out so that we can put this money into the DC bylaw so that you're appropriately recovering that from the development community if it's truly for growth. The rate study, which Council and the PUC has passed, that was a big step forward as well to making sure that you have enough money to sustain the state of good repair for these assets, and that should be reviewed every 5 years. And then we're suggesting that you consider an entirely new wastewater master plan that looks at some of these solutions that we put forward in more detail. And then lastly is the need for an asset management plan. Under Regulation 588, you need to be compliant by July of this year with a new full asset management plan, which is the future levels of service. And I know the staff are working on that now. But it's coordinating that asset management plan, which is about the existing assets you have, with the growth, which is the master plan assets, and making sure that those two things have enough money that they're not competing with each other. Next slide. Lastly, a couple more slides here. Our foundational thing here is we feel that the PUC is lacking in a long-term strategic business plan. They do have a business plan, but we're looking at things like a mandate, overall goals, what are the key levels of service and key performance indicators, and then really having a stakeholder management strategy. When you have limited resources, this is critical to have a good long-term strategic plan and knowing where you're going for the next 10, 20, 30 years. We're suggesting what we call a municipal view model, which is our model, which is built off of another model, which is called the balanced scorecard approach. And there's also Baldridge approach. There's many ways to do this strategic planning. I'll just go to the next slide, which gives you an idea what we're talking about with a municipal view model business strategy. It's really looking at what are the customers you have and what are the services you provide to them. What are the operations and processes that you have to provide those services and how much do they cost? What technology improvements do you need to keep performing those processes and providing that service to the customer? And then lastly, none of that works without the people. So what is your people? How many staff do you need? Do you have the right amount of staff? Do you need to work on the culture? And then lastly, it comes down to money, which is the finances and the assets. If you don't have the money and if you don't have the appropriate asset allocation, you can't run any of this business. So it's making sure that you have a plan for that. Lastly, you wrap all that together, and that's the strategy document that you would come up with that would review all of these things and build yourself a strategy. And that's our presentation for this evening. I'm happy to take questions.
So what I'm going to do with this is any questions we have of the consultant, we'll get those through, and then we'll go to the discussion. We'll take the questions out of that part. So we'll do that piece first, and then we'll go. So I have Councillor. Put up your hands, please. Anderson, Sagachi, Harrigan. Okay, so we have three. So Councillor Anderson, you can start, followed by Councillor Sagachi.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. Thank you for this presentation. This is my second time seeing it, and I've had a little bit of time to go over it a bit more. And while I certainly appreciate, I wish we didn't require your consultation on this, but we are definitely in a critical state with our PUC, so I appreciate you giving some suggestions. One of the questions that I do have is the structure of the governance of the PUC and the commission, where we sit and we're 6 councillors that are making these major decisions, and this has gone on for a very, very long time. And in no way, shape, or form am I an expert in underground water infrastructure, and I'm not sure that anybody else that sits on the PUC is either. With that disconnect with the municipality in the past, I mean, we obviously have a different dynamic now and hopefully moving forward. Was that taken into account as to how we got to this position that we're in right now? And is there a suggestion that you would have liked to bring forward, or was that not part of the strategy of this task for you?
Yeah, it wasn't part of our strategy. We do make a few comments in the more detailed report about coordination and collaboration and governance. And I do think that there is something ongoing right now, but that wasn't in our scope.
Thank you. I think that it is important moving forward that we do really look at the structure of the commission and how we move forward with that in a very strategic way over these next 10 years, like you're saying, to make sure that the best decisions are being made. And I know that there's been a motion, I believe, that the mayor brought forward to look at this. Does anyone know where we're at with that? And is that going to be in the strategic plan in July?
I can answer that for you. So KPMG has been hired for the governance review. That work's just beginning now with an expected delivery in October of this fall. So it's a governance review of the PUC.
Thank you. So that won't be included in the July master plan as far as a restructuring of the commission?
That's a separate project was ongoing the same time that we had municipal view reviewing the master plan. So it's sort of a parallel project that's going on.
Yeah, thank you. I think that we can say that it's a parallel project, but I think that it kind of boils down to kind of a similarity too, of we're still being asked as a commission and now as council to make this decision. And with there being a disconnect of the municipality, I know that I have reached out not only to the PUC, but also to engineers here through CK. And I mean, it's important that we do include these experts that we have both at the administrative level with CK and also through the PUC in order for us to make these really, really big decisions, because this isn't an easy decision for us to make. And in no way, shape, or form do I feel like I'm the expert to sit around a table and say this is exactly what we should be doing with a $2 billion deficit in life cycle and capital costs. So I feel like, again, we're in a situation where we could be potentially putting the cart before the horse, where you're asking us to make this decision now before we actually have a master plan moving forward. So my second question is, when we did the interviews, when your consulting company did the interviews, who decided who was interviewed, and why wasn't every member of commission interviewed?
Through you, Mr. Chair, or Mr. Mayor, sorry. We did put the offer out to all of the commission members, and we only received 2 responses back from the members, which was the chair and Councillor McDonald. So we did reach out to all of the commission members to ask them for an interview.
Did that go out to the whole commission as a whole?
To all the commission members, yeah.
Oh, okay. I must have missed that email.
So, yeah, I don't want to.
And then I just have one more technical question for you. When we discuss now potentially using Wallaceburg as, are you saying a raw water line as an intake or as a Chatham out from Chatham out?
Yeah, so it's really a fairly high level concept. There's a lot of work that would have to be done to do that. But we know this provincial government is very strong on greenhouses, and they really believe that there's a need for them. I just don't, so there is an opportunity there. If the plan was to make Wallaceburg 28 megaliters to supply 14 or 16 of those megaliters to the greenhouse industry, there is an opportunity, rather than throw the infrastructure away that's there for Wallaceburg, if we were to bring a pipe up to create a raw water pumping station. It would be called, Hamilton had this for Stelco when I was a director of water in Hamilton. So you use raw water, and then the cost of that would be borne by the greenhouse, not the residents.
Sure, yeah, no, I certainly understand that concept. I guess my question is, do we consider like where we're drawing water from? Because I know right now Chatham is drawing from Lake Erie, is that correct? I believe Wallaceburg does not draw from Lake Erie. I believe they draw from Lake St. Clair. So if we're cutting off like a major separate water source, what were to happen if we were to have like a major contamination in Lake Erie per se?
So a couple things, I'll respond to that through you, Mr. Mayor. I think the likelihood of a contamination is always higher in a river than it is in a Great Lake. There's many people that draw from Lake Erie, so it's a highly unlikely scenario that something would happen with that source. But the Safe Drinking Water Act does take into account the treatment of that water. So regardless of what your source is, you have to treat it to certain parameters. If there was, let's say, hydrocarbons or a spill in a river, that would be much more disastrous because it's such a smaller body of water. Whereas in Lake Erie, that would have, it's called the size of the receiving body could absorb that with less impact. And the same thing with Lake Ontario and all of the people that draw from Lake Ontario.
So from decreasing from 2 water sources to draw from to just one source, it doesn't pose a significant risk to...
In my mind, no. You've got, Hamilton has one plant with one pipe going out to Lake Ontario, 600,000, 700,000 people. Mississauga and Brampton have 2 plants for 2 million people. Toronto has 4 plants with, I don't know what Toronto is now, 3.5, 7 million, 6 million people, something like that. So I would say it's a higher risk to draw the water out of the river than it is to draw it out of Lake Erie.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And that's just one of those questions where, ignorance is not bliss in sitting in my position, because my thought would be, why wouldn't we keep 2 drawing from 2 water sources as a safer bet for clean drinking water as opposed to just going to one major source. So I certainly appreciate you clarifying that for me. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Sakachi, followed by Councillor Harrigan.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Caniff. A lot of times we get these reports and they're really complicated and really technical, and I think that you did a really good job at putting it together in a method that myself as a councillor who doesn't have any expertise could understand. I actually went through this report several times because I found it very, I'm going to say alarming in some aspects, but it was very well put together so I could actually understand it. So in the report, there's a lot of verbiage regards lack of coordination, lacks, issues, challenges, and you actually mentioned the word scorecard. So for somebody who doesn't have the technical knowledge, as many of us councillors that don't sit on the actual commission, if this was an actual scorecard or let's say a report card, where are we at for like a grade? Are we talking like a DC? Or are we talking, I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot, but I think it's important for us who doesn't have the technical knowledge that we can see this very, a baseline of what your thoughts are, because in reading this detailed report, I got to admit there's more challenges than there is champions, right? So.
Sure. Yeah, so it would be impossible for me to give this an actual grade, but this is not an uncommon problem across Ontario, Canada, North America. Coordination and communication is a huge issue in all large organizations. Some municipalities are going towards utilities. The Region Appeal right now with the province, as you're aware, is looking at should we go from a city department to a utility. And others are going, Peterborough, for instance, we just finished a study for them a couple of years ago. They're going from utility and they're bringing it all back in-house. So there's no right answer to that. It takes hard work to coordinate, and these are very complex issues that I think staff are doing a great job at right now. Although we wanted to give you the facts, that doesn't mean that staff aren't working on it and there's not solutions there. I think there are. But they're different than they've been for the last 25 years. These are new things that are coming at you, and staff are finding their way through, and I think there is coordination and communication happening.
Thank you. And one of the part in the report that you actually mentioned during the presentation as well is the water loss. I think it was 15 to 55%.
Correct.
Is there like an industry standard of what you would normally like to see? Because I would, obviously it's high, I know that, but how high is it compared to industry standard?
Yeah, I was the director of water treatment for the city of Hamilton, and we had a high water loss at about 15%, and we spent $20 million and got that down to about 10%. Newer municipalities would be in the 8 to 10 to 12% range that have a lot of PVC pipe. Water loss isn't just leakage. Sometimes it's unaccounted for water, which is firefighting. It's a lot of operational water. Backwash water for treatment plants. You've got a lot of flushing happening out in the system because you've got a lot of long dead ends and water decays. So the chlorine evaporates, for lack of a better term. It doesn't actually evaporate, but it decays, and now the water isn't as safe to drink. So you keep flushing the water to bring fresh water in. So that's part of your problem as well. But that's where a study would define what that problem is and how you could reduce that.
Thank you. And just a question to Mr. Dubin. Mr. Dubin, I know that we're having the governance that Councillor Anderson mentioned, but is there a potential, like in that governance, to be also, I'm not going to use a word, but a mediator, but somebody who can kind of align between the municipality and the PUC on a more regular basis? Or is that something now with this report and with the potential governance change, is that something that's, because I think that the communication, which you noted in here and you noted in other municipalities that have a hard time, I think that now that we have all this information, what's the next steps besides the governance, what we can do to approve the alignment to ensure that our growth plans here and our strategic directions here are compatible. And lastly, just to you, Mr. Dubin, when we do our strategic growth and our strategic things when we're first elected, does those things get sent to the PUC so they understand what we're looking to do from like a growth perspective and the quadrants and like a planning perspective? For instance, what Ryan brought to us to council, are those things being sent to the PUC? Because if those aren't happening, I'm sure that they're more working on operational sides of things instead of the actual potential of growth, which I see is kind of lacking in this report, right?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Caniff. So I'll try to answer the last question first. I don't know if the study was actually sent to the PUC, but I'm pretty sure the PUC is familiar. Even when the PUC writes reports to council, and there have been a couple of reports to council, they do make reference to the council's strategic priorities. I don't remember how many members of council attended, obviously, those sessions that we had, but we have overlap between the members of council and members of the commission, so I expect that members of the commission are all familiar. You see it right in front of you every most Mondays. So I think there's definitely is awareness of the council's strategic priorities. From a staff perspective, that probably a question for Mr. Galbraith. I think they're probably aware of them. Is that a fair comment? Yeah, they are. Your second question talked about sort of the outcome of the governance review. I don't know what the governance review is going to say. I think Mr. Harnham is right. It's kind of, you have to look at what the municipality and the utility need at that particular time that the review is being done. In some municipalities, they've gone the opposite way. In some, they've embraced the approach that we currently have. Others, they've reversed it. So it's really hard to tell until KPMG does their work. It's hard to tell whether or not, like what the outcome of that will be. It'll come to you, and you'll get the opportunity to make a decision on it. It may very well be, by the way, I expect they will talk to a number of councillors before they produce their report. So it may very well be that whatever they recommend has some sort of a, I don't know if it'll be called a mediator, but a process to follow is probably what they would recommend, is a process to follow to ensure that there is alignment between the commission and the municipality, or whatever the commission looks like after the governance review is completed, and then council endorses the approach. They may want to keep it the same. They may want to endorse whatever the consultant comes forward with. So I don't know what the answer to that will be. I will say that I do think I'm looking forward to the governance review, because I think there is an opportunity for the level of communication to be greater. Our community's changed. We're now talking about building new things to accommodate the growth, which is very different, as we saw from a report earlier today. When your population is declining the way it has, we weren't talking about master plans. We weren't talking about necessarily building new things. This community was really trying to just, fix whatever we had as best we could. Now, all of a sudden, we've got, 15 years of that kind of approach, and now we're suddenly looking at a different approach. You can't expect to just snap your fingers and think that that's going to happen. There has to be a more, I would say, defined, thought-out approach to how do we plan for the next 15 years. So.
Thank you. I just wanted to say, whoever, like the initiation of this and all that, whether it be from the commission or from, from the PUC general manager, or, I just think that this is a great first step, and I'm appreciative of your work, and thank you for keeping it to a manner that we could all kind of, it was palatable for. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harrigan, followed by Councillor Doyle.
Thank you, Mayor Keniff. So a lot of my questions about the report and presentation have been asked and answered. I do maybe just want to polish a little bit around the report, noting around how the division of responsibilities between Chatham-Kent and the PUC is complicated because of that absence of shared governance framework. And then capital coordination process, which is the other piece to it. In the recommendations in the report, that I'm sure was a collective writing, but that Mr. Quinton is authored here, it notes about the creation of like a Flow CK kind of task force team to help to move projects forward. Do we know, and as Michael, is that what you were referring to in terms of the mediator? Like who ultimately would that group be responsible to? Is that a PUC group? Is that a municipal group? Or is that a joint group? Because I feel like that's just a bunch of people then operating to be like, well, it's not clear which way we're going to go because there's some tension between the wastewater plan and the growth plan.
Well, maybe I'll go to Mr. Quinton first. Actually, I'll go first, and then we'll go to Mr. Quinton. I don't think we've sorted that out yet. I do agree that there'd have to be, we want to be in a position where we ensure that that flow is taking place. Now, I'm not so sure if it's a person or a mediator. I think it's the process itself. If the process is designed in such a way that that automatically happens, then we'll all be in a better place. So I think that is one of the intents of the group that maybe Gord will speak to it a bit more. One of the purposes of that is to ensure that there is a process so that you don't have one group making a decision without considering the other, the impact on the others, and vice versa. And I'm not sure that that happens now as well as it could. It does happen on occasion, and I would suggest that in my short time here, I've seen improvement, but I still think we have work to do, especially since we're now going to be moving towards building big stuff, and we haven't done that in a long time. Mr. Quinton, I don't know if you want to add more to it.
Thank you. I'll just add that the focus of that special group in the municipal side for engineering, of having them responsible for the new linear assets, linear meaning under roads going out, not the plants themselves. Having that distinction and having a group that's able to coordinate that with the plans for the roads, with Integris for the hydro, with Enbridge for the natural gas lines. It's just an enormous amount of work to develop a new area and to take that off the backs of the PUC administration so they could focus on the plant work. That was part of the strategy there that they, but that the charge for, of course, the water and wastewater would still be charged back through rates or through development charges or through the PUC.
Okay, great. My next question is in the recommendations, recommendation number 1 asks council to affirm the green, right? Things that were in the green category. By affirming what's in the green category, are we also saying that we're agreeing that things that are yellow and things that are red? Because I think there's a bit of lack of clarity around that in the recommendation report. I'm happy to affirm the green category, but I think I have more questions. And even in the presentation, it wasn't really clear, for example, like the Wallsburg treatment plant. Mm-hmm. Does it become a raw plant? Does it become something else? Does it get closed entirely? And so I just want to better understand what saying yes to recommendation 1 means for what's not mentioned here, which is the yellow and red projects.
Through you, Your Worship. So I think by affirming the green, you're just doing that. You're affirming the green. I agree with what you're saying. I interpreted the yellow to be, by virtue of the fact that it's yellow, it still needs further study. So you can't affirm it one way or another if that further study hasn't occurred. But it's Mr. Harnum's presentation, so he should explain whether or not that was the way he meant for it to be interpreted.
Sure. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to do that. Yes, I think it's exactly that. The green is ready to go. There's no reason why we shouldn't proceed with that, and there's actually reasons why not to proceed with that would be detrimental. The yellow will most likely proceed. I think you'll probably, staff will probably bring a report back when those get closer, or as one of our recommendations in our report is to kind of bundle all that together and have another sober look at the red and the yellow. The yellow have to go ahead. It's just you need some more work on that before we start putting tenders on the street. So they should go, but you need to do a bit more work. And then lastly, the red, we think that there are different solutions there, and we've had many talks with the Chatham-Kent staff and the PUC staff, and they're, to my understanding, working on what does that look like in the next year or two with those red categories.
Okay, so then just about the red category, sorry, Mayor Caniff, I'll echo Councillor Anderson's feeling like kind of a toddler in the wastewater department area of expertise here and trying to work through things. So is really the reason that Wallaceburg has kind of shifted to be in the red category simply because before we were thinking about maintaining what we have and now we're looking towards growth? Is that compounded with the greenhouse situation? Like, is that the reason for the drastic shift? Because there is quite a big change between those 2012, 10, 15 years ago to what's being recommended today.
Right. So through you, Mr. Mayor, I would say that the 2012, 2016, and even one of the last EAs did suggest a pipe. And that is a more affordable solution. I think one big thing that hasn't been discussed here is operating cost as well. Running a plant, if you do the Wallaceburg and bring a pipe from Chatham, and you bring a pipe over to Ridgetown Blenheim, you're down to 3 plants. you know, we've just finished telling you Hamilton has one plant for the entire community, and the Region of Peel essentially has 2 plants for 2 million people. So it's about operating costs as well. There's more chemicals, there's more pumping, there's backwash water, there's all kinds of things to run that plant, not to mention the maintenance cost of all of the new things that you might put in there for that $200 million. So whether it's growth or state of good repair, I think it's good business to look at that. You have to balance the growth with the state of good repair. If you didn't have that growth, maybe, I don't know, maybe you wouldn't be having this conversation. You would just say, let's spend the $200 million on that. But you have to balance all of those things. And you've got an opportunity in the Southwest Chatham to build industrial commercial, which you really need, as well as housing, which a community needs.
And then again, I'm assuming the answer is no, we're not worried. But when I think of our community with like kilometers and kilometers of space with no people compared to like Hamilton, right, where there's tons of need in that area, there's not a concern of having all of that kilometer of pipe through kind of a rural system and the service risks for that.
In my mind, no, and Hamilton does have quite a rural community as well. There's downtown Hamilton proper, but Flamborough, Carlisle, Ancaster, there's a very rural community there as well, including the Region of Peel in the town of Caledon. So they have pipes running up to those rural areas as opposed to having their own plants.
Okay, great. I would maybe just, and I don't think this needs to change in any of the recommendations, but this would be a wonderful topic for council to receive some optional education on. I think maybe once the governance report comes back from KPMG. It's still not clear to me who is ultimately in charge of saying yes to these projects. Is it us around the council table? Is it the PUC around the PUC table? We cover the budget and the capital and the policy direction, but what's the PUC doing? And so I have a lot of learning in that space to do and understanding, so I would look forward and really appreciate some further education. Thank you so much for your patience in answering my questions.
Councillor Doyle, followed by Councillor Story.
Thank you, Mayor. First, again, I'd like to thank you for the report. Very easy to read. And one of the big things I did like about it is, like with a lot of these master plans we get, it doesn't really put a cost factor into it. It just says, hey, here's what would be your best case scenario, but we can't afford the best case scenario all the time. So I think when you broke it down and said, like, this is your priorities, you did a very good job doing that. So thank you for that. I do also agree the greenhouses, I have no problem with greenhouses, but right now our DC costs are not covering the operational costs. So right now the general public is subsidizing some of the costs for that. And when these are for-profit companies, and not all of them, from my knowledge, are keeping all their products in Canada, and some of them are shipping it to the US because that's where the profits are.
Sorry, Councillor Doyle, this is meant for questions, and if you can have your time, so just if you have questions. Yep. Thank you.
Okay, so I guess this is the third time then that it's been brought up for the pipe to be ran from Chatham to Wallaceburg now in different reports. So, and those are experts doing these reports, so that would make sense. But what would happen, say, if we had a situation, so say we did do that, and then we had a situation in Chatham like we did in Wheatley, where there's a fire, like like a catastrophic fire, what would happen at that point? I asked that in PUC as well, but.
Yeah, so through you, Mr. Mayor, I think the question where you're going is, would having the Wallaceburg plant help us? Not really. Wallaceburg is, if it was 14 MLD or megaliters per day, you need 50 megaliters to serve Chatham. So if Chatham had a major catastrophe, the water coming from Wallaceburg would not solve that problem. So that's the first part of the question, I think. The second part is, can you afford belts and suspenders, right? It's that simple. Is, you know, if you feel as a community that gives you a safer feeling, then, you know, is it affordable? But I don't think it is a huge risk, considering everywhere in the GTA, all the way around Oxford, Niagara region, all of these places are faced with similar decisions.
Okay, thank you very much. And I do like that you brought up going towards the 401. I think we should have done that 2 to 3 decades ago. So it's nice that we're planning that, nice and that was in the report as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Story, followed by Councillor C. McGregor, then Councillor Crew.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Jim, for that report. It was very informative, and appreciate you bringing that to us. Most of my questions have been asked, but just to get a little bit of clarity on, in terms of your presentation, and I think we're still getting a chance to ask the staff piece. Based on your findings, if I am understanding your presentation and the report correctly, it sounds like some of this disconnect is because of some lack of communication or clear communication lines between PUC and the municipality. So as I'm thinking through this, and I'm hearing the discussion from my fellow councillors, in your experience, are PUCs normally separate from municipalities, or is it just really depend on the municipality and those government structures? Because it really does feel like we're missing a piece here, and it is, and obviously this has happened for quite some time. Like, it predates most of us on council, but I'm sensing a theme here in the discussions we're having and in the report. So, in your experience, how does that normally look?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, I think if it's a PUC, it is a separate entity. Or it's a laws, which is another separate entity. There's the Peterborough Utilities Commission, which is a separate entity. Many municipalities have it as a department of the corporation. But I can tell you, communication it's not a fatal flaw here. You can have a large community like Hamilton or Toronto that I worked in, where the planning department doesn't talk to the water department. Right? It's communication is hard regardless of your governance structure. What we were pointing out, it wasn't the root of all of the problems. We were pointing out that there seemed to be with Southwest, Southeast, Wallaceburg, there seemed to be a disconnect on what the priorities in the communication was. So I wouldn't say this community has a tragic problem compared to other communities. Communication is one of the main issues in all of these complex problems, for sure.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. I just think sometimes when you're adding another level of organization, perhaps those issues can be made more challenging. Could you clarify the LOS plan you mentioned that needs to be done in 2025? Could you explain a little more about what that is?
Sure. LOS stands for level of service.
Okay.
And as part of your asset management plan for Reg 588, July 1st, 2025, you have to have a proposed levels of service. You already have an asset management plan that deals with your existing levels of service, and you need to be in compliance with the regulations. You need to have a proposed levels of service, which means what are you, and levels of service is, not to belabor it, but it's a difficult term. It's really about the life cycle of the asset, not so much do we want clean water or dirty water. That's really not the term level of service. We're using it more as the life cycle of the assets for the level of service.
So that's in a week. Is that what this is?
I'm not sure the status of that. There are many municipalities that are struggling to meet that deadline. We're working with several municipalities right now, helping them get to that deadline. But I don't know where your municipality is with that. And again, if they're not prepared for July 1st, 2025, there is no asset management police. There's no charges. But there are many municipalities that are struggling to meet those deadlines. So
Okay.
I'm not sure where you are with that in your process.
We can address that later. I think the last couple of quick questions. State of good repair versus growth. When you mention things like I think Councillor Sakachi referenced as well, the leak rate in like 8 to 9% you mentioned is reasonable. We are now at 55%.
In some areas.
In some areas.
Yeah.
That seems like a fairly dramatic difference. To me, does it sound like we've got to get our state of good repair in certain places before we could actually look at growth? Because our state of good repair, if we're looking at 55% in some areas, is that what we should be prioritizing?
I think it's complex, and that's why we're recommending a study, because it's not necessarily just leaks. It could be operational flushing, which is moving old water and putting new water in. You have to dispose of the old water, it goes into the sewer. causes two problems. It also causes you to have the water come back to the sewer and you have to retreat it again. But I think they go hand in hand. I don't think it's a if this, then that. I think it's by finding water loss, you may not have to build as big pipes or pumping stations or whatever the case might be. So the state of good repair and the growth should go hand in hand.
Okay, and we don't know what those are, we don't know what those causes are yet. The next study will capture that?
You would have to do that study for sure. And there's 27 different places, not to bore you, but 27 different places you lose water, and you need to assess where that water is going through district metering in different areas, and then you would be able to put resources towards either changing your processes, upping chlorine, doing something, or stopping the leaks.
Okay. And last two questions, thank you for all that. You mentioned that other large areas have one plant that services the entire municipality, areas that have rural components or large populations or both. Would that ever be something we would want to consider?
I think your Chatham plant is that plant, right? It's central. It's going to now, if you went ahead with the Wallaceburg pipe idea, it would send water there. You would look at the new southwest. So you could be down to 3 plants from 5 by doing that. That and the Ridgetown Blenheim system. So, sorry, I lost the train of thought in the question there.
Oh, no, I was just thinking, just to reiterate, the consolidating plants, because you mentioned other municipalities just have the one.
Yeah.
And since we have multiple, maybe it doesn't make sense, but I wonder if there are consolidation opportunities in Chatham-Kent.
Absolutely. You should constantly look at that. I was a Commissioner of Public Works for Halton Region, and Milton is a groundwater system. They're constantly, the community wants to keep that system. It's a very expensive, it's like Blenheim and Ridgetown, very expensive system to maintain. We were looking at consolidating that to the Lake Ontario system because it's just such a high cost. And there's higher risk with smaller plants.
Right. Okay, well, thank you. And just the last question, and this is maybe a question even for Meredith or Judy, but your green slide with the green means go, would we be able to pull that back up so we have that for reference when we're discussing the next phase, just for reference? Those are all the items that you think we should do essentially immediately?
And there's excuse me, through you, Mr. Mayor, there's a detailed list in the report, project by project as well. But I'm not sure what the staff recommendation was, but if it's that list, then it is, that one there. Is it the same? Not sure through staff if it's the same list.
Just to, because in the first recommendation, it says we would be voting to go ahead with the green, so that would be the 93.7?
That's correct.
Okay. And that is, you mentioned, and you use the example of the 117 to the $150 million example from just less than 2 years ago. Is this an inflationary number?
I would say the closer you get, through you, Mr. Mayor, the closer you get to design and construction, the higher the price goes, as you've probably seen that many times. And through my career, I've never seen a project go down. So the more detail you get, when you have pre-design, you're at plus or minus 100%. You get to 30% design, you're plus or minus 50. You get to 90% design, you should be plus or minus 10%. So that the staff will, when they design those projects and put them out on the street, they will get actual costs to you for recommendation and approval.
Okay, so in the next 0 to 5 years, we're looking at 32 million, but that is a fairly high level estimate.
Correct.
Okay.
It's an estimate from an ACOM study, another consulting firm, that, and we listed them directly from their tables in the report.
Yeah.
So that's their estimates, and already that is 2.5 years old, 2 years old, those estimates.
Okay, so it would be more than that. Okay, that's a lot of information. I appreciate you taking the time to explain all of that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor C. McGregor, followed by Councillor Crew.
Thank you, and through the mayor. In your report, I just want to go back to the mention of a possible raw water, Wallaceburg being turned into raw water for greenhouses. Would that still not have to include pipeline towards Dresden or towards these greenhouses? And how would we, at the price of running all those lines, would be similar to running line from Chatham to Wallaceburg. How would we recoup that from a greenhouse owner?
Right.
I can see recuperating the water costs, but how do we recuperate all the upkeep and initially putting those water lines in? Would that not be the responsibility of the municipality to do that, to get it to that stage?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, you would, if this project, two things I would recommend. If this project was just for greenhouses, then I would say the greenhouses should pay 100% of the cost. Now, they may say we can't do that, we can't afford to do that. So then if this is a priority for the province may say, we think this is a priority, and they could offer funding towards that. I think the maintenance and operating of that system could be a private system. There are examples of that out there. With the Stelco example I gave, we put the infrastructure in as Hamilton, and Stelco operated it. But I think the entire pipe, the system, the treatment, the pumping would be the responsibility of greenhouses if that was the case. But you may choose to operate it and charge them a fee. I don't know.
I think the millions of dollars that are indicated in all these projects would make it very unfeasible for greenhouses to consider having to share that cost. But the next question, and I have for you, you talked about the escalating costs of the water treatment plant, and I think in our previous presentation at the PUC, I had asked this question about, are not all the plants escalating in cost? And
Absolutely.
I think you confirmed that it's not just Wallaceburg, it's all of the plants escalating cost. So if you're looking at communities such as Hamilton or Toronto that only have one plant, why would the recommendations not be to shut down all of the other plants and only have one mega plant and run new lines, which would be cost apparently a lot less than operating and running all of these other plants? Why would it not recommend, why would you not recommend lines to run to all of the communities of Chatham-Kent?
Sure. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think the key is you're at a fork in the road. You're at a decision point with this plant. You may, to the previous councillor's thought process, you may do that when you're at a fork in the road with those other plants as well. But right now, you're at a decision point to spend roughly $200 million or to do something else, which is potentially $100 million cheaper than that, and reduces ongoing operating costs forever, as opposed to, so that's the impetus for this, is the decision point that has to be made on Wallaceburg.
So, and just one last question. Do you know what the landmass of the Hamilton scenario is?
I don't off the top, no.
Do you know
I
what
worked there for 10 years, I should know.
Do you know what the land mass of Chatham-Kent is?
I don't know.
It is, I believe, somewhere between 2,000 to 3,000 square kilometers, which is hence
Huge.
probably why we have multiple
Absolutely.
treatment plants. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Crew.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Thanks, Jim, for the presentation. And I'm going to be very brief. I was going to ask about the greenhouses, so that's been answered. Thank you. But I just want to, just historically, and we're talking about, and I agree, we land on these committees and commissions, and we learn as we go. Every single one of us, as we got elected, we were picked to go on committees. The committees and commissions before us, they did the best they could. They were faced with challenging times, and a lot of times it was band-aiding things. They were handed this large community in 1999 and called it Chatham-Kent. Here we are, and now we have all of these issues that were handed to us. So I just want to say that the work that was done was no different than what we do sitting around this table. We do the best we can, and we learn as we go, and we try to educate ourselves, and staff really tries hard to educate some people that sometimes we don't know a lot about the subject matters, and we try really hard. But I'd like to say that, you know, we've started to right the ship a bit with the development charges and things like that that we've been working on, and these master plans. And I
Sorry,
think,
is there a question?
no, I'm
sorry.
just, I did have a
Because you will,
question.
yeah, you will have time, some time. to
That's
make some
all. I
comments.
don't
Okay.
have anything else to say. I'm done.
With that, any other questions of the consultant? Oh, sorry, Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Through you, I guess they call it the Erie Beach water treatment. Does that do Chatham now and Blenheim, or what's that treatments out there do?
The southwest,
Yeah.
southeast
Yeah.
plant,
Yes, the one
Darren,
outside.
did you want to answer
Yeah.
that?
This-
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Darren Gilbert, General Manager, Chatham-Kent PUC. The South Kent Water Treatment Plant, it comes up as far as Doyle. It comes over from Blenheim area, underneath the 401 and to Doyle line. That's as far as it usually goes. But if we ever get into situations in Chatham, we're going to take the water tower down for service, whatnot. We'll actually bring Chatham water as far as Park Ave. So, and then obviously right now, South Kent Water Treatment Plant is assisting the water in Tilbury and Wheatley as we speak. So that's usually where the water goes from South Kent Water Treatment Plant. It also services the Bloomfield Industrial Park.
Originally, wasn't it designed to take to Ridgetown too, like that water treatment plant was to go to Ridgetown originally?
No, it was not.
No. Okay, all righty. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no other questions of the consultant, now we will get the motion on the floor. Councillor C. McGregor and Councillor Anderson, can I get you on the floor for discussion, please?
Yes, I'll put it on the floor.
And I will second.
Okay, Councillor C. McGregor, go ahead.
Thank you. Before we get to the recommendations, I would like to, at this point, make a motion that the recommendations be referred back to the PUC and the administration of Chatham-Kent until the following has been provided to council. And I believe it might be coming up here. Number one, the creation of the joint PUC and municipal group with the purpose of completing a joint servicing strategy that will include the new growth management policies and the recommendations of 2, 3, and 4 in the current recommendations in the report. 2, the new growth management policies be adopted into the official plan as required by the obligations under the Planning Act and the Provincial Planning Statement 2024, setting the direction about growth options and planning of the phasing of residential and non-residential development in the primary and secondary urban centers. And 3, engineering design that includes estimated capital costing after the completion of the service plan for the southwest quadrant of Chatham-Kent, which is currently in draft form. And 4, information in a combined PUC municipal report that includes engagement and consultation of the community of Wallaceburg and affected surrounded areas. The consultation should include the advantages and disadvantages of no longer following the recommendations of the earlier studies and EAs conducted between 2012 and 2023, and the recommended rehabilitation or replacement of the Wallaceburg water intake and the Wallaceburg water treatment plant. If I can get a seconder on that, I will explain my thoughts on this.
Councillor McDonald? Sorry, Councillor Anderson, I asked you to second the original, so if you want to.
Yeah, I'm happy to put it on the floor. I just have or to second it, I just have a couple questions.
Okay. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so my recommendations, 1 through 4 of the following. The first recommendation should be put on hold until further information can be provided to council. The second recommendation that I made in there is referring to the report provided to us last week by Ryan Jocks at our last meeting that addressed the urban boundaries in our communities. The report said it had completed the second of 4 phases, so this is still incomplete. The third recommendation addresses the need for information that we did not receive before setting our priorities for this term of council. And the fourth addresses the multiple EAs and community engagement sessions that we're being asked to now ignore. The fifth recommendation in the report, it appears to me that Chatham-Kent administration think we need an oversight committee of the already elected officials that currently represent the council at the PUC. And personally, as chair, you know, I find this kind of unusual. So, and as for the sixth recommendation, I had to write this in because I missed that when I wrote my notes. I see no reason that this can't continue without the approved motion that is required, but I'm quite happy to have that added in as a recommendation should another councillor wish to see the recommendation regarding greenhouses added back in. In tonight's report provided to us by our Chief Financial Officer, Gord Quinton, noted the municipal VU Consulting was hired to review and prioritize the municipal water and wastewater projects. This report found misaligned growth priorities, coordination gaps, conflicting priorities, glaring infrastructure needs, and operational risks. And I'm sure many of you noted, Mr. Quinton was quoted in the media as saying that the review also found that Chatham-Kent's municipal administration and the Public Utilities Commission have often operated independently and lack an undefined strategy for planning and delivering services like land use, engineering, and infrastructure investment. He's quoted as saying that the division has resulted in inefficiencies, missed collaboration opportunities, and inconsistent communication, adding the future growth of Chatham-Kent and its finances require a unified plan moving forward to align priorities and expectations. The report presented to us tonight by Municipal VU Consulting says that it's discovered the water and wastewater master plan does not account for the southwest quadrant of Chatham, a strategic growth area identified by council, and that this was a strategic area identified by council. The report says its omission limits the municipality's ability to support development and meet housing and employment targets. The draft Southwest Community Servicing Study outlines over $780 million in infrastructure needs for phased growth, according to the report, in addition to another $975 million already identified in the master plan. The report also identifies a lack of integration between the PUC and municipal administration, with no shared capital prioritization or unified servicing strategies due to the aging infrastructure and high water loss and incomplete sewer separation plans. For these reasons alone, these recommendations need to be referred back to the PUC and CK administration. The PUC commissioners received this information less than a week ago, and it was only provided to council on Wednesday, one day prior to going to the public. As councillors, we make pretty big decisions based on reports provided to us. We trust that the information we receive is accurate. The presentation and the report both state the southwest quadrant as being one of councilors' major priorities. And looking back, how do we trust the decision that we made, making this a priority when we had not received all the correct information? I think I've said enough, but I'll conclude with with a few remarks at the end, if I can.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a reminder to all of council, you had the opportunity to ask consultant questions. Now that there's a motion to refer on the floor, it's strictly comments to that. Should that pass, we'll move on. If it fails, we'll go back to the original motion and have a conversation with regards to that.
Okay, questions regarding the referral? Okay, here we go. Okay, keep your hands up, just, sorry, I'm going to, Councillor Anderson will be first, and then Sakachi, Harrigan, Hall, Doyle, Stewart. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And through you, mine's very, very brief. I know that we have an obligation to have a master plan by July. I just wanted to make sure that we are not missing something here by going ahead with this motion, or is this going to stop us progressing with certain things that we need to do? And I'm not sure who would be the best person. Gord, thanks.
Thank you. The part that I referred to, the asset management plan requirements, is actually on the agenda later tonight. And Sean's Hillardy's report.
So this would be fine, or does this would this just take us back to like status quo? Like I feel like we do need to move forward with the PUC. We do need to make significant changes. I definitely agree with that. We're definitely in a critical state where critical decisions need to be made. I guess in a sense, the feeling that we have, a lot of us as counselors, I think, and as commission, I may speak for all of us, I may not, but I think I probably speak for the majority of us when I say, like, making really major decisions like this, we're kind of going on, the expertise of others, which is fine, so long as we've had our own time to process this. And if anything, some of us maybe feel like this is potentially a little bit rushed to take in all of this information to make this drastic change. However, I'm not saying this isn't something that needs to be done. I guess I just want like the solidification that this is definitely, this request originally is supported by our administration and by the PUC.
So if I could comment on the deferral, we as administration do have concerns. Costs are escalating very, very quickly. We've moved, even Wallaceburg, we moved from talking about a $40 million plant a decade ago to a $200 million plant. There are this may cause significant delays. If you're asking for another month to report back at the July or August council meeting with more information around something, that would be a couple month deferral. A couple of these items, and perhaps Bruce should comment about the official plan, and Edward about the South servicing study, but both are in the works, but I wouldn't want to be delaying any significant amount of time, or else it's just going to mean that you're adding to need even larger rate increases at the PUC in the future to pay for this. Remember, this is all paid for by the water and wastewater bill. Maybe Bruce.
So,
Thank you. And I guess I'll just end my comments with, I feel like we oftentimes have a difficult time making really drastic decisions around this table, especially when it's maybe going in a different direction than we had originally planned. And unfortunately, we are in that space where we do need to make some sort of drastic decision, or else we just continue going in this same place, and we can't afford to keep going in this same place. So, thank you.
Councillor Scotchy, followed by Councillor Harrigan.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. And through you, I guess Councillor Anderson just asked some of my questions, but I just need a little bit more clarity. So maybe Edward or Darren, how long are we talking for this potential, this recommendation and this motion? And just maybe to Bruce too, like, is this going to affect any of our growth aspects or anything like that? Like, I don't know I just don't know I understand that, like, number 4, it's important, but just from a timeline perspective of all this stuff.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. Bruce McAllister, General Manager, Development Services. Thanks, Council, for your question. So I'll jump in number 2, and I'll probably defer to Edward on the other pieces here for the next, and Darren. But Ryan Jocks, it was mentioned earlier, Ryan's over here tonight as well, from our Director of Planning. He did have a presentation a couple weeks ago on where we're at with the growth management and growth options review in the proposed schedule. Essentially, we're hoping to be in front of council with these options by the end of this year. If we defer this, it's probably going to make that more difficult, because one of the fundamental pieces in evaluating where you want to grow or expand a settlement area boundary is, can it be efficiently serviced with municipal services? And I don't know if we can answer those questions till we get to this next step, to come back to council and say, here's where we should be growing, because we may ultimately not be able to afford it, or there's some servicing challenge that we can't foresee happening for 50 years. Why would we go grow in that direction versus another area? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then just in additional to, Edward, I know that it's been delayed a little bit, but staff has also been working on the recreational master plan as well. And my opinion is that it's probably going to have some significant asks in there potentially. Is this something that you're looking at as well from like a recreational master plan standpoint as well, or is this something that's kind of a moot point when it comes to that?
Thank you. Through the mayor to the councillor, Edward Solo, General Manager of Infrastructure and Engineering Services. All the services we provide are linked. And so when I look at, some of the recommendations out of our master plan, they require servicing. And if we don't have certainty that some of those recommendations will have servicing, we're really just pushing things back further and further. I'll comment on the item number 3 there. Engineering design includes estimated capital costing after the completion of Southwest servicing plan, the service plan for Southwest Quadrant. That plan right now is at a very high level. It's in draft. It'll take quite a bit of time just to complete high-level cost estimates. To do engineering design, we're talking about years before we come back and know those numbers. So what this is going to do is push back the timeline for us to implement new growth areas like Bruce has talked about, or implement any other recommendations of the master plan that require servicing.
So just to clarify, this isn't talking like this term of council. This is years. Then this is outside of our even term. And Councillor Story, I think, mentioned the word critical. So is this something that you find if it passes that we are going to, I guess, breach that critical point?
I would say that this motion basically maintains status quo with a lot of uncertainty for many years.
Anything else, Councilor?
No, it's just a lot to just trying to yeah, it's a difficult decision. I mean, if it was a month or something, and I agree with I understand Councilor McGregor's number 4 for sure. If it was my community, I'd definitely be doing the exact same thing. But knowing that years, how the consultant said about the costs associated with escalation and all that, and being critical and the challenges, it's difficult at this point. Thank you.
Councillor Harrigan, followed by Councillor Hall.
Thank you. My questions are related to the impact of the referral to recommendation number 1 in the report. And I had asked this question kind of to clarify what recommendation meant. So I believe this question through the mayor is to Edward. There are master plan project summary recommendations in green, for example, like state of good repair for wastewater treatment plans, or Wheatley-Tilbury water supply improvements, right? Like in the green that was presented to us. The way that I read this motion is that we would also be pausing on what is in the green as well, but I wonder if those are already in our capital plans. Like some of the state of good repair is just some like capital improvements that we would make in order to keep our wastewater collection system in a state of good repair. I'm not sure if that was a question, actually. Do you interpret this motion as being that we would also not do what is in the green, what is in the report that is in the green?
Maybe I'll go back to the original recommendations from the report that Gord wrote. They were developed, number 2 and number 3, to start to move on projects. So we start to implement them, to design and implement them. Specifically being the green ones. This one here, I'm not exactly sure how that would work compared to that. And I don't know if Darren has any comments on that.
And perhaps it's to the mover, if she could comment to help me understand.
Yes, Councillor C. McGregor, can you comment on particularly the green ones that we're talking about?
And yes, in looking at that, I can see in through the report tonight, if somebody wanted to add that the recommendations, the green recommendations move forward during this period of time, I have no problem with that amendment into this motion.
Well, is that something we can add in
Yes,
your
it
recommendations?
could certainly be added into my recommendations that even that this is being referred back, but number one could be incorporated into my recommendations. I have no problem with that. And even some of the other ones, and I've heard some discussion there, you know, these can be separated and voted on separately. You know, if some people can understand my methodology or what I'm thinking in some of these, but don't necessarily agree with one or two, they could be separated out too as a vote.
Yeah, because my thought is perhaps the mover is wanting more information in order for us to make some decisions on what is currently in the yellow and the red categories. But what I see in the green are like operational things that we need to do, right? There was a fire at the Wheatley treatment plant. We've got to fix that, and we might as well fix that properly. So then, however, and I will lean on the clerk, the first line of the original recommendation has council affirming the prioritized project direction as demonstrated in the municipal view consulting, Is it a friendly amendment for me to ask for a friendly amendment to include in this referral to proceed with the green category project as described in the report, which is just the bottom of the first recommendation?
Because this is a new motion, you can put anything you would like in number one.
So then I would like to ask our mover and seconder if it's a friendly amendment to include the line that council proceed with the green category project as described in the report.
I'm fine with that.
Yep, definitely.
And that's all I will contribute for now. Thank you.
Councillor Hall, followed by Councillor Story.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I couldn't agree more with Councillor C. McGregor's motion to defer and fully support it. Decisions like this, with this magnitude and the change of strategic direction, we need to ensure that we have all the details, all the proper information, and we need to ensure that the public is fully aware of these potential options. And I was thinking as well, you know, I know it's in the motion to the neighboring communities, definitely our neighboring community on Walpole Island First Nation. I know a lot of Walpole Island First Nation members live in Wallaceburg as well. The rest of my comments, I'd like to kind of wrap it around two streams of thought as well. So first, I recall covering this topic as a reporter prior to being on council. I think it was around the 2016 EA. I think I remember interviewing Councillor Thompson when he was a fresh-faced PUC member back in 2016. But I also recall the community of Wallaceburg not only having concerns, but coming out in droves and attending public meetings, providing feedback, speaking passionately about maintaining the water source for the community. I also recall, as I was kind of alluded to tonight, based in part of that really near unanimous feedback from the community that the preferred recommendation by the EA process that took place was changed due to the strong message, and the source was kept the same. So that's always been something that I've really held on to that. And, you know, I've spoken with lots of people since I've been on council because I thought that was a true testament of how people's voices matter and how you can impact change at the municipal level. Another example is the community rallying to save the hospital in Wallaceburg. That's another example that I've always used. So secondly, with this tonight, so fast forward to today, I really can't help but draw a comparison to a very real and active situation that we're dealing with right now in Dresden, the proposed dump. We've hired lawyers, we've rallied the community and our neighbors, we've invested taxpayer dollars, we're putting signs in our yards to defend Dresden. I have one in my yard. And I believe in everything that we're doing with that. But at the end of the day, what are we hoping for, you know, besides it just going away? We're hoping for an EA process to take place. And why are we doing that? So that we can have our collective voices heard. The province is saying that there's some overarching issues and there's some other priorities and that the dump should happen anyway, regardless of what the community says. So we'll see what happens with that. But unfortunately, this sounds really similar to what we're being asked to do tonight. And it's really frustrating, but I wanted to illustrate that comparison, and I think it's contradictory tone. We have a lot of unanswered questions, as Councillor McGregor alluded to. Our community, judging by 0 deputations tonight with this report, thanks. Judging by the, noted, going into overtime. judging by the 0 deputations tonight, our community is not aware of this proposed new direction. So I believe that staying true to our council's strategic direction of being open and transparent, that points us to sending this issue back. So I'm hoping for council support for Councillor McGregor's motion. Thanks, Mayor Kenneth.
Councillor Story, followed by Councillor Doyle.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Really appreciate the discussion. Clearly, we all have very good questions, and this will likely be one of the most important discussions we have in terms of this council term, in terms of the cost and the impact on the taxpayers. Because financially, if we don't do it, our economic growth and that might suffer, and financially, if we don't do it, we're going to suffer. But if we go ahead with it, it's a massive cost to our taxpayer as well. I am glad to see the deferral motion by Councillor McGregor. I actually, as the previous recommendation reports did, I was not comfortable supporting that as it was written, and with Councillor McGregor's amendments, I will be supporting that because I also had a lot of unanswered questions from the first report that, based on the scale of what we're looking at, I didn't feel that we had, there isn't a clear financial recommendation in the first report for us to be transparent and accountable to our taxpayers to say what we are approving and why. And based on some of the councillors who are PUC representatives who have shared some concerns, I respect those concerns as well, including the chair. So I think just a few quick questions. I'm not clear, to Councillor Sakachi and Anderson's point, I do appreciate the risk of delays. I am still not clear on how getting this additional information would potentially cost us years in terms of a time frame. That's where I'm still not clear, because I totally understand we have a lot of moving parts with this. I'm sorry, I don't know who that question should be directed to, but I am still not clear on why this could potentially add more years to this process by getting the information that Councillor McGregor has asked for.
Through you, Your Worship, maybe if I can ask Mr. Soldo just to give a bit more detail on number 3, for instance, right? That's the engineering design piece that includes estimated capital costing. So, unless I'm interpreting it wrong, I think that's saying that you've got to do the engineering design, which costs a lot of money. So I think part of the delay is probably raising the funds to do that, and then also the work, the time frame associated with the work. But maybe, Mr. Soldo, you can give a bit more idea about why you said it would cost years, take years.
Thank you, through the Mayor. The CAO is correct. If it's the wording that's there, engineering design, that includes estimated capital costs. Right now, we're doing a servicing plan. We would have to do EAs. We would actually have to do engineering. Most of you are aware around the table that takes 1 to 3 to 4 years. That's why the way that motion is written right now, that is problematic to come back, and then that's sort of a short time frame.
Sorry, Councillor C. McGregor, you're looking for some clarification from what Mr. Soldo said?
Yes,
I
actually.
realize that,
Yeah,
sorry.
and it's just clarification on his remarks, but I thought by adding the green category priorities back into this, the yellow and the red were like 5 to 10 years out, and the other were possibly not due. So if we add the green categories back in, which has been added back to, or added into my motion here, we're going to be in that timeline regardless if we're looking at getting information for the other recommendations that are in the previous. So I'm not quite understanding why it's going to take that period of time if we're going to move forward with the green category projects.
If I can, Your Worship, that would be helpful. It may be that like the operative sentence there, the first one that says the recommendations be referred back to the PUC. So perhaps the mover might consider that it would be are you talking about the yellow and red recommendations then? Because if you add the language that I think was proposed by Councillor Harrigan, then that would help. Because it's still there, it still says engineering design, and it basically says that the recommendations be referred back until. So that would mean none of this can be done until all that design work is done. So that's where I think the confusion came in. So, again, I don't want to speak for the planners and engineers. Maybe they can jump in if they think I'm mistaken. But if you clarify that the the yellow and red recommendations are the ones that would be referred back until some additional work can be done. I'd be still interested in hearing from Mr. McAllister and or Ryan Jocks, just in terms of how that impacts the rest of it. But that would help because at least it means that we can move ahead with the green stuff, which I know was your intent. But with that language there still in paragraph number 3, that's where I think we're looking at a couple of years and a lot of money to get engineering design done. Is that okay, Councillor?
Okay. And that wasn't my intent to cause years of issues here for the engineering department. If it's clearer for administration that the recommendations of the yellow and red categories from the report be referred back to and I put the PUC and the administration of Chatham-Kent because I think the creation of that group, and that's in the group that's going to be formed, say the CK flow or whatever, needs to be a combination of both PUC and municipality together so that so that we don't have continued misunderstandings between the two. So if it makes it easier and better understood, that the recommendations of the yellow and red categories be referred back to the PUC and to the municipality administration. That's.
Mr. Soto may want to add to that. I have an emergency.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Just for clarity, the green does not include any projects in the Southwest servicing area. Right, so if you are intending to have growth along the Bloomfield corridor, if you're intending to implement some of the recreational master plan recommendations, that would not be included in this, and we would not be able to move forward with those areas. I would also say that if council's direction is to move forward with the green, then you would most likely want to include the recommendations from the original report, numbers 2 and 3, because without that staffing, we cannot move forward with the green projects either.
No, I'll be flexible and remove the words engineering design if that makes it better for you. But the capital costing and the completion after the service plan, the Southwest Quadrant, it needs to come back to this council so we understand what those dollars are. So far, you know, from what I read in the report, like we're over $780 million of costing of servicing water and wastewater to the Southwest Quadrant that everybody wants to move forward with. I think we're entitled to that information and those costs before those decisions are made. So, like, if you want to take out engineer design from number 3 so that it includes capital costing, like, you know. I'm sorry, I can't make decisions on and the size of these decisions that come back to council.
Yes, so, Mr. Soldo, does that help if we take that out? Because I don't think the looking to do is stop the initial progress on those things, but ultimately when we start getting down to we're spending hundreds of millions of dollars, that's when we want the approval. We're going to need to do some of that. So that's why I was going to ask. The general question is, what can we do? You know, the yellow and red, that's the big issue, is saying we need to look at it more. But how, we collectively don't want to stop the progress and wait 2 years to start that process. So that's where we're looking here. I think that Councillor C. McGregor is trying to find that median that we can move on with everything, but we really need to have a better business case for the yellow and the red. And I think that's ultimately what the report's saying, is we need a better business case to say, what are we going to do with in those cases?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just for clarity, it was always the intention of staff and the PUC to come back to council and the PUC with the results of the servicing plan. And that's why it's not actually included in any of the recommendations in the first report and then in the motion here. So you don't see the Southwest Servicing Plan, any of the recommendations that Gord has put forward. It's always our intention to follow the process and come back with those costs to council at a future date.
But the recommendations in the original report says council affirm the prioritized project direction as demonstrated in the municipal VU Consulting Inc. Water and wastewater plan review and direct the Chatham-Kent public utilities. It says to proceed with the green categories, but it also says to support the priorities of that report. And those priorities are to then adopt the scenario of the yellow and the red. And
So again, maybe for further clarity, the green, the yellow, and the red speak to the existing PUC master plan. They do not speak to the servicing plan.
yes, they do, but you can also not understand what the cost is for servicing the southwest quadrant without including those costs to us to be able to understand what's being asked for us in the original recommendations. At the bottom, at the end of the day, you know, it's going to come back to the public. It was council's direction. And if we don't understand what our direction that we're voting on clearly, then, you know, it shouldn't be considered council direction.
Yes, so the yellow and the red are the contentious issues. I guess I will get back to, what are the barriers, Councillor C. McGregor's motion, what is in here that stops you from at least exploring those options and coming back to council eventually with those costs? I don't think the intention of this is to stop that. It's to say, hang on here, we don't want to commit to the yellow and the red. We need to look more. I think we all agree we need to look at all those. So I think we're really getting hung up with the wording here that we could talk all night about that, but just I think that's the, correct me if I'm wrong, that's the premise that we're looking at, is saying, let's look at all this other stuff. We commit to the green, but don't stop the movement of figuring out what's best in the yellow and red categories. Is that a good summary? Yeah. So I guess with that, Mr. Dubin, is there anything we can change in here that opens that door for you? Because I think we're all saying the same thing collectively, but just in a different fashion.
Yeah, I think, thank you, Your Worship. I appreciate the clarification about the green, yellow, and red, and I think we all get that now. And I'm appreciative that there seems to be some support subject to a vote for the green. I think the part that's missing in this new set of recommendations is how is it going to be done? The recommendations that were in Gord's report talked about creating a group and probably coming back to council with a proposal on how much it's going to cost to do some of this work. I think that's part of what is missing in this one. And so, and the challenge is the way that it's worded, even with the amendments you talked about. It said the yellow and red recommendations be referred back to the PUC and the admin until the following has been provided to council. So we have to do all this stuff, but I don't think we have the assets to do the stuff. And I know that, I think Mr. Quinton wanted to speak to that. Those are a couple recommendations in Mr. Quinton's report that are missing in yours, Councillor. And I get it, that's not really your
And actually,
role,
no, that is what number 1 addresses. It's the joint PUC municipal. I didn't call it Flow CK, but that's what that is. You know, you can call it whatever you want to call it. My recommendation is a joint PUC municipal group with the purpose of creating that joint servicing strategy, which then goes to that recommendation of the Flow CK.
It's the same intent
It's the same
is what
thing.
you're,
It's,
okay.
yeah.
Maybe Mr. Quinton, I know he had something to add. That will be helpful.
Councillor Story, you do still have the floor. We're just trying to clarify this, so.
Oh, yeah, thanks.
Thank you. I think we're all getting to the same place of that's what the original recommendations was to do. Move forward with the greens, because they're not. We haven't done the engineering designs for the greens yet. Like there's been some EAs and some plans started, but we need to get those things going. We put them on hold for an additional 6 months to have Municipal View do the work that came here tonight. So those need to get going. the yellows and reds need to be studied. And whether it's with the Flow CK group or the PUC, and I know we had government discussions and everything else tonight, but I think we're really getting to the same place that we need further study. When you're talking about the Wallaceburg, there's no decision on what tonight on where we're going with Wallaceburg. It's saying to stop and take another look.
Sorry, just to try and wrap this up, because, well, at least get this, because I think we're saying the same thing. And if there's nothing in here that is like from Edward or Bruce or from Gord to say, oh, this is a showstopper, we can still continue on what we're doing, because I think we're saying the same thing, just in a different motion. So, I'll let everybody else speak out, but I think, are we there? Unless I see anybody saying there's something there that this stops us in our tracks from doing this.
Sorry, point of order. I do believe that Edward did say it does stop any progression of anything. This
But
motion
that's
does.
where I want to get to specifically, where in here does that stop it? And that's why I was trying to find that ramp to say, so is there something, Edward, in here that when you go through, you need to do the studies or something? So we've taken out, suggest taking out engineering design.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would suggest that C be removed, because it speaks to the southwest quadrant. We have a process in place. We'll come back to council as we follow through that process. It's not referred to any of these. And what's missing in this motion is items 2 and 3 of the original recommendations. That tells us, as CAOs indicate, how we're going to actually implement these.
So I'll go back to the mover then on those things that Edward just mentioned.
Your Worship, can I make a suggestion?
Certainly, I'm looking for suggestions here.
If the mover's okay, and I apologize, we have had an emergency situation, so I've had to get up a few times. If the mover is okay with it, I think we all agree that 3-4 years delay or multiple years delay is too much. It seems to me that we're pretty close. And I hear from Councillor McGregor and the seconder and some of the folks who've made suggestions. I think we're pretty close to language that probably everybody can agree to. And I don't like having a discussion in the public suggesting that we're fighting with our councillors. We're not. We're all trying to reach a common place. I know we have another meeting coming up. I think we can work with Councillor McGregor on language that would be more comfortable for everybody. I'd like to do that behind the scenes so that we can then bring something forward. Because I think we're all saying the same thing. We have a situation, we need to address it. The green ones, I know you haven't voted, but I'm gonna go out on a limb and say the green ones are something that most people want to get done, and we have to work out the wording. I can tell you staff have no objection to the language about the engagement and consultation. That's something we would do anyway, so I appreciate that both councillors have spoken to that. So if it's okay to just, if somebody would bring a motion to just defer this to the next meeting, and we can work with Councillor McGregor and the seconder to get some language that I think will meet our needs.
Is that good with you as the mover to defer to the next meeting and come back with something that works? Because this is a pretty complicated issue, and I like to make sure that we get it right. We're talking about potentially $1 billion here. So if we have to wait a few weeks to get to our next meeting, I don't think that's going to be the end of the world, but I would like to make sure that your concerns are taken care of the seconder, but I think we're pretty close to having the right wording.
And if that's what everybody, if I can see some heads shaking around here, if everybody's happy with that to move to the next meeting to come up with better language, then certainly I will put this on hold to refer this to the next meeting.
Okay.
For voting.
You're moving that, Councillor Anderson. Will you second that?
I will, so long as there's ample time for Councillor McGregor and I to have the conversations that we need to have with the administration, with the PUC, to come to common ground, so that when we do come back to council, there's some confidence in what we're bringing to them, so that we hopefully don't get in this situation again where where we are kind of all going back and forth and not having an understanding. I just want to make sure we are all very, very clear when we do come back. Thank you.
I see there's that's about 3 weeks, and I think we're pretty close collectively. As I look around, seeing the head shaking and things that I think we're there. We're pretty, it's just the wording. I hate sitting here trying to wordsmith that we miss something that's so critical with what we're looking at. So with that, sorry, anything, other comments? Sorry, I'll go, Councillor Story still has the floor from this, then Councillor Story, and then I did have Councillor Thompson as well.
Thanks. Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Yeah, I appreciate all the discussion. That's why I asked the question about the timing, because there obviously is some, we haven't quite landed on that. I don't know if my questions are, if we're deferring all of this, if there's a point in asking them, but maybe I'll just quickly ask. So if we're deferring this, Councillor McGregor's motion, are we going back to the original, or that is also not going to be discussed? So that's also off the table for tonight?
Yes, the wording would be similar to what we have on what we were contemplating there, but modified accordingly.
I think my only just 2 questions to that then. In terms of the growth study versus the servicing with the southwest quadrant, at our last meeting when Ryan presented that detailed update about our growth area, like the areas of growth across the municipality, is this a chicken and the egg type approach where why would we even be talking about growth in the southwest quadrant in isolation of infrastructure needs in the southwest quadrant? I guess maybe still being a first-term counselor, I'm learning a lot as I go, but I guess I perhaps assume that servicing needs are included in discussions about growth in our community. So I find the piece about why that was not addressed in other PUC plans is I think for another discussion, but should be addressed. But I think in terms of what we already have discussed even in the last council meeting, to Councilor McGregor's point, I don't see how we can't do one without the other. Or is it a chicken and the egg thing? How can we talk about growth in the southwest quadrant and approve that at our last meeting and then say we can't talk about the infrastructure needs of that? To me, that was all part of the same discussion, but perhaps I am not understanding that correctly. Is it a chicken and the egg thing? We can't have one without the other, or we can't do the one first and then the other second, or we've got to do it all together?
We're going to ask Mr. Jocks to come up, and given the reference to...
Sorry, I think this is a question we can
Not
deal with,
related to motion.
because we can discuss this the next motion, we have that, because we're starting into details. It's just, we're going to I really want to focus on just postponing it to the next meeting. We will have another
The whole thing?
Yes, so we are just saying, it's time, we need to have some time to reword that, so we can come back with that motion, and then we'll start again fresh, and everybody have their opportunity to speak to it, et cetera, at that point. So, Councillor Thomas, is there anything you want to say about this?
Yes, just real quickly, and I appreciate all the conversation that's gone on around the table. One thing that has kind of become clear to me is that this isn't only a Wallaceburg issue. This is very much a Chatham-Kent issue that has wide-ranging impacts. And going back to number 4, that's not up there anymore, and I appreciate it because I think you're right, Mr. Mayor. When we wordsmith this on the floor, it gets really awkward and difficult, so I'm glad it's going back. But I would like to see the consultation expanded beyond the borders of Wallaceburg to include all of Chatham-Kent. That's the only thing I would like to add my 2 cents, okay?
Okay, Councillor Hall?
Yeah, thank you. Quick question. Considering that this report is going to be pushed to the next meeting, I just want to confirm that new deputations will be able to be submitted for that item on that day.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, with the new motions coming forward, we want to be transparent and give the public an opportunity to speak to those. So yes, it would be, deputations would be available.
Okay, final words, Councillor Anderson, then Councillor Seamer, anything quickly on this?
Thank you, and through you. I think that I'll just state again that I feel like we're in this position because we have a really difficult time making difficult decisions as council, and it's because we care so much. But ultimately, us not making really difficult decisions and continuously referring things back is the exact reason that we're in this position. And if we continuously continue to send things back and not get things done and not get things done, it's just gonna be exactly as it was before. A $40 million project becomes a $200 million project. A $30 million project of the Civic Center becomes a $54 million project. You know, it just, if we continuously kick the can down the road and we don't make these really, really tough decisions, we're just gonna keep having to make tougher and tougher decisions. Thank you.
Councillor C. McGregor, anything?
And thank you. And yeah, I didn't have pages of follow-up comments after this. But I do want to pull one little piece out of this. And it's actually in our report of 18A that is coming next, the core detailed asset management plan. And it states in there that challenges for the asset management plan, one of the challenges, input from the public, will strive to include public input to ensure Chatham-Kent is responsive to community needs. And under continuous improvements, it says, improve public trust, demonstrating improvement and responsiveness builds public confidence in how service decisions are made and justified. So I'll leave it with that, and hopefully that will.
With that, put it to vote.
Councillor Bondi?
Yes.
And Councillor B. McGregor?
Yes.
All votes are in. Motion passes 17-0.
Item 17, Development Services.
17A, Chatham-Kent Community Improvement Plan Property Tax Increment Equivalent Grant for 100 King Street Holdings, Inc.
Councillor Story and Councillor Juvenville, can you put this on the floor, please?
Certainly. So moved.
And seconded.
Councillor Story and then Councillor Juvenville.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I just had a couple of questions. Certainly, this property has a strong public interest, and I did get some questions from constituents, so these are questions coming to me from the community. Certainly very interested and excited to see what's happening at the downtown Chatham Center. I think the investment by the private developers who own the site is to be commended, and certainly welcome their investment to improve that part of downtown 100%. I think where there's a couple questions that there might be some information in the public that is not accurate as to what this actually means. So I have some questions that came in from the public that might help clear some of that up, just to give you a bit of background. So is it correct that any business owner who owns a brick and mortar building in Chatham-Kent can apply for the CIP and for tax relief? And is that always 100% tax relief and always for 10 years, or are there other options within that framework?
Thank you, Your Worship. Bruce McAllister, General Manager, Development Services again. I'll start with answering some of these programs. I think I can address most, but I may rely on some other members of staff here as well. But to this particular question, yes, the CIP program is certainly open to everyone, and there are several programs offered within our CIP. We're specifically talking about the property tax increment grant program tonight. Some incentives within the program are limited to the type of use that's being proposed, and sometimes it's based on location as well. So some of the programs only apply to our defined downtown areas, for instance, is one example. And not all projects are eligible for 10 years. That was actually amended a couple years ago based on the first iteration of our CIP from 2020. So some are now limited to 5, depending on what is the estimated eligible costs or construction value, and by project type, for instance, as well. Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Bruce.
Okay.
I appreciate that additional information. I see in the report that the CIP was put into place to target investment in rental and affordable housing, commercial business growth, and employment growth. Does that include market rate rentals, and do we know if there are any rental or affordable housing units being planned for this site?
Thank you, Your Worship. So the CIP does still offer incentives for apartment dwellings at market rate. That was changed to, it's 10 years, but it's now 70% a year is rebated back versus 100% in the previous iteration of the program. And by apartments, those are apartments over 50 dwelling units. And affordable housing is incented up to 10 years now as well, and that can be anything 5 units or more. In this particular, there's not a residential component in this phase of the development we're talking about here tonight. It's all commercial or employment type uses.
Okay, thank you. Can you expand a little bit on what commercial and major employment type use is? Is that like new businesses going in or existing businesses moving from elsewhere in the community, or what that looks like? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So those terms are all defined within the community improvement program specifically. So commercial uses are, the use of land, building, or structure for a purpose of buying or selling commodities, essentially, or supplying of services, is distinguished from employment uses, which can mean generally industrial uses, but also means offices, business support services, call centers, scientific research facilities, warehouses, or other type similar uses. So in this case, it's a combination of both. In a major project is defined as anything with over $10 million worth of eligible costs or estimated construction value. And that's the requirement up front on our application, that the applicant provide us with what their estimated eligible costs are. They have to do the same for any building permits as well, because that's what the building permit fee is based on.
Okay, and so that doesn't come into play until after they're finished building the building, like renovations of the site? Or does that, I think I'm a little curious, I'm maybe perhaps not clear on the timeline.
Sure.
Why we would be approving this now versus when they are finished?
So, thank you, Your Worship. No grants are paid out until after all projects are finished, just to be clear on that. So we're really talking about eligibility. We issue eligibility letters saying, based on what you provided, you appear to be eligible for this. The property tax grant is the one program that does come to council for approval. That's defined. There's other ones that are smaller grants that have been delegated to council, like facades or building and planning, building fee rebate incentives as well.
So this is basically the applicant is giving you notice that once they're finished the project, they will be applying for this?
No, sorry, maybe just for further clarification, Your Worship. So they are applying for the CIP eligibility. We're asking council to endorse that if they meet all the thresholds, finish the project work within 2 years. That's one of the stipulations in the CIP from the time of this approval tonight. That has to be completed within 2 years. And then MPAC will reassess, based on the construction that's happened. Potentially, we assume it will go up to some extent. And if they meet all those requirements, they would be eligible. Every year, a proponent pays all their taxes. If they meet all the requirements after that first year, we'll rebate back just the incremental portion of the municipal taxes. So for clarity for everyone does pay their current base tax. So whatever the mall is paying now, will continue to pay. This is really just a matter if there's an increase in assessment, they would get that rebate over the 10 years after impact reassesses.
Thanks, Bruce. So so they're applying now to have that come into play when they're finished? Ideally, if they finish the building in the next 2 years?
Correct.
Okay. And also to be clear, they are paying taxes now, but if the value of the property goes up, which I'm sure it will because they are investing clearly a substantial amount to improve it, if the value of the building goes up or the property goes up, the difference of that will be the relief they receive.
Thank you.
But they will still be paying taxes the entire time.
Thank you, Your Worship. That is correct. And that's really
Thank you.
what a CIP is designed to do in this fashion, is to, incent somebody to reinvest especially in the downtown cores, and the tax break is really on that level of reinvestment that they would be reassessed going forward.
So it's too early to say how many tax dollars would be provided?
Yes, at this point, we don't know that for sure until MPAC does a reassessment.
Okay, and does that part come back to council?
No, we generally don't come back to council after the fact. No.
Councillor Story, you have a lot more, I've given you some leniency, given that there's questions and answers, so if,
Sure. No, I appreciate that leniency, Mr. Mayor, and I think that wraps up my question. There's just some misinformation, I think, in the public, so I wanted to be clear on what some of that looked like. So thank you for your flexibility on that. Thank you, Bruce.
Mr. Dubin, go ahead.
Yeah, so just on the last question about does that come back to council? Mr. McAllister's right that it doesn't come back to council specifically on that piece of property, because by then it's too late. But what I would anticipate is staff would give updates on the success of the CIP. We can't really do that now because of the fact that the province hasn't done their impact reassessment, so it wouldn't be very valid. But I'm hoping that in about 10 years' time, which is when some of these buildings that came online in 2019, 2020, 21, this property, we will be able to assess how much investment has occurred and how much increase in property values has occurred because of our CIP plan. So councils in the future will get a far better idea of how successful this is. We know it's going to be successful. We just don't have a number to give you. So this property and all the properties that you approve will come forward at some point once we're in a position to give you updates on, you know, the impact it's had on taxes. We won't know that in the case, well, 5-year ones we could probably do soon, but the 10-year ones we wouldn't be able to do in 10 years have passed. And I won't be here, so.
Well, a lot of us won't be.
Councillor Jubenville.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Councillor Story asked most of my questions. I just want to confirm so I understand. So it references $16 million project. So is that just being attributed to a portion of what they are doing? This tax grant is just based on the $16 million. Am I understanding that correctly?
Thank you, Your Worship. The tax grant is based on, so a project is defined, if you're investing more than $10 million on a project like this, you are eligible to receive the property tax increment grant. So their current construction value on this phase of work they're doing now, they've given us a $16 million. So they're $6 million ahead of, that's a big investment, right? It's into this project. So that's why they're eligible for the 10 years.
Okay, so it's not really designated to anything specifically. It's just a kind of a blanket amount, would you say?
The tax rate, what will be rebated?
Like the $16 million is what I'm referring to.
Oh, the $60 million is a construction estimate provided by them.
Okay.
Of the work they're doing. Yeah.
Okay, and does it have anything to do with the garage at all, or is it just on the building?
The works that they're doing for the tax grant, yeah, they are doing some work on the garage.
Okay.
Most of the work that they're doing is on the facade on King Street, frankly.
Okay.
It also includes the new elevator work
Right.
they've done. It includes the new escalator they'll be putting in. There's just some examples of all the construction work that's going on there.
Okay. All right, that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
Councillor Bondi? And Councillor B. McGregor? All votes are in. Motion passes 17-0. 17B, application for zoning bylaw amendment, 650 Park Street, Community of Dresden, North Kent.
Councillor Jubenville and Councillor Wright, can I get you what's on the floor, please?
I so move.
I'll second it, thank you.
Councillor Jubenville, go ahead.
Yeah, I just have a few questions. I know it's in the report, but just for clarity, because there's a lot of people concerned about this. The zoning that we want to change to, it would still allow for a senior citizens or assisted living retirement home to still occupy that location if that was the decision of the applicant?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff.
Yes, the proposed medium-density residential zoning still provides for a retirement home.
Okay. Do we, so I received I went to the meeting, I saw a copy of the plans, and on it, it did say, affordable apartment conversion from senior residence. So that is making a lot of people thinking that this is going to become affordable housing. So is it going to be affordable housing?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I did not attend the meeting, but one of the planning staff did. I understand you were there as well, Councillor, and I have read the summary. I do know that the proposed rental units are supposed to be at a market rate. There's no subsidy being applied that would define it as affordable through various government programs. So this should be considered market apartments.
Okay, so we would have knowledge if it was going to be designated as affordable housing. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so that would, so if something happened tonight and this was voted down, what are some things that could happen if this was voted down?
Under the Planning Act process, if this was voted down, the property would remain in the institutional zone. The owner of the property would be afforded appeal rights to move this application to the Ontario Land Tribunal. And the impact on the community of Dresden would be that this building would likely sit vacant for a longer period of time until a new proposed use perhaps could be proposed for that site and come back to council in the future.
Okay. So many people have reached out to me with concerns about this because they feel the new owner is the previous owner. They have concerns about a lot of things that have happened, and they're just very concerned about what happened with when it was previously Park Street, the senior residence. What will happen if the owner continues on with conducting his business the same way? It says that the apartments, there's going to be like 40 apartments, but they're not sure how. And do we have any governance over how they would construct these apartments? Because right now they were rooms for the retirement residents, but now if they become apartments, I would assume they would have to have like a kitchen and a bathroom in each unit. Do we know how these rooms are going to be set up as apartments, or do we have any authority over that?
The authority over how they are set up is ultimately guided by the Ontario Building Code. So provided the owner provides drawings by a qualified person that meet the legislation of the province, then those would be approved and inspected throughout the duration of the project by municipal building services staff.
Okay. Okay, that's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
Councillor B. McGregor?
Yes.
And Councillor Bondi?
No.
All votes are in. Motion passes 14-2.
Item 18, infrastructure and engineering services.
18A, consolidated non-core detailed asset management plans 2025.
Councillor C. McGregor and Councillor Anderson, can I get you on the floor, please?
Sure.
Yes, I'll second.
All right, I got 4 speakers to start. Councillor C. McGregor, followed by Councillor Anderson, Councillor Harrigan, and Councillor Sakachi. Councillor C. McGregor, go ahead.
I have to pull up the report first, sorry, hold on. If you want to go ahead, it's nothing like my last motion. If you want to move beyond me and come back and on this, okay? It was just comments, so.
Councillor Anderson, followed by Councillor Harrigan.
Sure. Thank you for this report. My only question was just strictly clarity that this report was not suggesting anything, that this was just bringing us to the next level, that then suggestions will be brought forward for decisions to be made, correct?
Thank you for the question through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, that is correct. You are going to approve the proposed levels of service as the consultant had said here before, but it will require us to go back and look at the creation of the long-term financial plan, which will connect your budget processes to the asset management plans, so you know when you're investing, what levels of service you're able to sustain over the long period of time, which was in the April 28th report and will be completed in 2027, in time for the next multi-year budget.
Thank you. And I just wanted to clarify for the public, because I've had lots of questions about this with this report coming out. Obviously, people got like a little bit worried about it. But I want to say, as far as transparency goes and through this whole process, you've come and spoken to us a couple of times now, and it's very much appreciated that we've been included with each process and stage along the way. And this is just another one of those stages to get us to the final. So I certainly appreciate all the transparency of this. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Harrigan, followed by Councillor C. McGregor.
Thank you. Through the mayor, I just have a few questions, more to help myself and members of the public kind of understand about that asset management planning process. So can you just remind members of the public before I ask the questions, like, what do you mean when we say non-core assets in the non-core asset management plan?
Sure. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the question. I know it's a bit clunky terminology. It comes from the provincial legislation itself. In the future, we'll just refer to them as the asset management plans, but to get through meeting the legislative deadlines, the non-cores would be something such as, so emergency services, thinking of fire, police, paramedics. It would be recreational sort of services. So you're thinking trails, arenas, pools, those sorts of things, cultural ones, museums, libraries. We're talking also RVG, we're talking public health, we're talking about the sort of things that you would think are more service-based and less hard infrastructure in the sense of roads and pipes in the ground.
Okay, and then in the report, the DAMP that we have, it outlines kind of like what that gap is, right, in terms of the asset management plan. Would you say that we are in, so that's, sometimes when you look at that, it can be very shocking when you see it for the first time, right? Like, oh gosh, we've only have 20-something% of our stormwater that's funded, or we only have 60% of this that's funded. Is that, like, are we in good company there compared to other communities across the province, or is this something that's unique to Chatham-Kent?
Thank you for the question through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, this is not uncommon. I'll give you a couple of examples. Toronto, when they first did theirs, was $28 billion. Windsor's $2.6 million. Hamilton, when I did the core asset management plans there, they were 2.5. They're now up to $5.8 billion. It's a completely common problem to have, not just millions of an infrastructure gap, but billions, because this municipality is very old. It's had a long time to build up a lot of infrastructure, and it will take a long period of time for us to be able to work our way to intergenerational equity in a sustainable place.
And then last question, sometimes when we're making decisions about different asset categories, you'll hear members of the public give an argument, well, you shouldn't invest in X because Y is more important, right? And it could be any two things. Why is it important for us to continue to invest in various asset management categories as a municipality compared to, for example, putting all of our money in gravel roads so that we then turn them all into pavement in the next 3 years?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, an excellent question. So in one of the recommendations in the April 28th was for us to ask the council to consider in the next multi-year budget to raising it from the infrastructure asset management plan funding from 1.5% up. We wanted you to increase it. Primarily because that and throughout the communities, there's vastly different needs and different desires. There's different demands. People want libraries. They want parks. They want to make sure that they have good trails for recreational purposes. They want to make sure that fire, police, and paramedics have the assets necessary to respond to their wants and needs as well, too. So the idea is to make sure that we are, when we come back, and one of the recommendations in the April 28th was to have administration take a look at how best to invest in that plan, the increase of the asset management funding, so that we are creating a sustainable and equitable future And that's really challenging when you have so many diverse assets and so many diverse people, wants and needs. Not everybody just wants a road. People do want to make sure that RVG is taken care of, or that they have good trails, or that they have outdoor pools to go to. So those competing needs is the best way for us to look at that investment funding and how to spread it out to make sure that it's meeting the needs of the community, not just today, but in the future.
Great, thank you. Appreciate your patience as I ask those questions, and thank you again for this report. It's very well done.
Councillor C. McGregor, followed by Councillor Scotchy.
Okay, and thank you through the mayor, and thank you, Councillor Harrigan, because you addressed a couple of the things that I had on my mind here when I was going through this and reading this. So this is actually a plan that needs to be in place for the province for the 1st of July, is that correct? And that's why it is here now. Unfortunately, if we were to turn this down tonight, what happens with this 1st of July date? Again, that's, it's kind of coming, I think, at the last minute before it's required to be completed. And you can answer that in a minute, but so is this basically a prelude to a list of assets or infrastructure that we have that will be on the chopping block that is going to then again put council at each other because of what happens in different communities and what is recommended?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's an excellent question. And asset management is not in any way intended to pit need versus need or community versus community. That's not the idea. We look at Chatham-Kent as a whole, and we're trying to make sure that one of our primary goals, which is in the strategic asset management policy, is to ensure equity. So the goal is not to say one or the other. It's to just have a realistic sort of approach and say, it would be lovely to afford everything. We can't afford everything, so how can we address these needs equitably across the way? And the asset management plans are really tools, and hopefully you've all read the overview document, but this is a tool that councillors can also use when dealing with the province and suggesting that we need additional supports. The idea behind that overview document is to provide you some opportunities where you can just look at every single service quickly, see what the gaps are, where the needs are, where the funding is required, so that we can not only advocate for it at higher levels, but also when we're sitting around this horseshoe or when you're discussing with constituents, you have some very good evidence at your fingertips to be able to have those frank conversations you need to have with your constituents. If we don't have them, if we don't have those conversations, we don't educate the public on how much these things cost, we'll just inevitably have them thinking we can keep going at the pace that we're going at without making sure that we're being very wise and responsible, making sure we're funding things appropriately. And the other part is that we've extended this to be a 30-year window to be able to reach sustainability, because a 10-year window is just an impossibility. So with a 30-year window, we hope there's a little less back and forth and that there's more of a cooperative approach to looking at how we can solve this infrastructure gap problem.
Okay. It kind of, after our earlier reports and our early conversations, it kind of feels like a cart before the horse scenario again, because we're moving or supposedly moving forward with this plan without really knowing what this plan's going to entail. So hopefully there'll be a lot further conversation that comes after this. So
thank you.
Thanks.
Councillor Scotchy, followed by Councillor Story.
That's okay, Mayor Caniff, I'll pass, thanks.
Councillor Story.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Thank you again for the detailed report. These have been really educational. I really appreciate the effort that you and your team have put into this. Just in terms of clarity for the public and myself as well, levels of service are not necessarily, so to recommendation 1, if we adopt the proposed levels of service, are we or are we not also agreeing to a financial commitment to that, or the level of service merely means we are approving the approach and then the dollar amounts will come later? Because I'm not quite clear in the financial implication section. It doesn't attach, okay, by approving this tonight, you're approving $100,000 of costs. Like, I just didn't see that. So I just want to be clear, this is, the level of service terminology might just be more of a term versus a financial commitment. Is that, am I understanding that correctly?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, great question. So when you're setting a level of service, which I've always said is council's role and responsibility when you pass your budget. So when you pass a budget, you are passing inevitably the level of service that you're going through. What we've done in our plans here is to propose that we're not veering off anything. We're not suggesting you're cutting anything. We're not suggesting you're adding anything inside of this level of service. It's just that we're going to maintain what we currently have. And as the consultant had said, it could be considered as a condition. So we're going to maintain our highways in good condition, our local roads, say, in fair condition, because that's what's, that's basically what we're saying there, is that the level of service that you're providing is either going to be condition-based, it's going to be capacity-based, or it's going to be function-based. Okay, so when you're saying this, does it impact the budget? It could, in the sense that 5 years, 8 years down the road, you may need to invest more in renewals, or you may need to do a higher maintenance level. But what we're saying in here is that you're proposing that you're going to maintain the current level of service that you have, and there's the budget implications that are within the plans that say you need X amount of dollars to get there. And we've approached it from a 30-year window. So what we've done is, one of the financial measures that we use is something called an ARFR, Asset Renewal Funding Ratio. And that really means that we have the money in place to, say, replace a fire truck or an ambulance at the time that we need to do that. And so what we've done is we've taken all of the plans and we've taken what their current asset renewal funding ratio is, and we've stretched it out over 30 years, and we've applied a rate that says you need to put aside this much money over time to be able to achieve that sustainable 90% goal inside of 30 years. So what we've also suggested in our April plans is that there's no real financial repercussions. They can't really be known until we pass the long-term financial plan. That's really the driver to this. That's what happened in the April 28th meeting, is that we had you pass that. We asked for the recommendation to be agreed to, that you're going to provide us with enough time to be able to do a long-term financial plan with Gordon and his staff to make sure that we have really good numbers for you. And I don't know if you remember, but when I first came to you, I said these are baby plans, and that we're going to get to really good plans by the 2027 timeline for the multi-year budget. We just need to make sure that maturity through education and process and practice, that staff are quite comfortable with it. I think Edward might also have a comment on that as well too.
Thank you. Just to add to what Sean was speaking to, you really have to read this report in conjunction with the April report. Because in April, we came back with a core asset management plans. And we had a number of very detailed recommendations for the council passed at that time. We did not want to repeat those recommendations because we already have direction, but you have to look at those two reports simultaneously. So this is only for the non-core assets. The consultant earlier about the other topic was speaking about water and wastewater. You've actually approved the asset management plans for water and wastewater in April. So we've met that timeline there. So I would just recommend council goes back and look at those recommendations. It really speaks to what Sean was talking about, which is the long-term financial plan, how it's going to be tied into the multi-year budget, looking at a review of all the assets and services to create a divestment strategy before that process, reducing the infrastructure gap, and also speaking to how we would potentially fund this over 30 years, potentially moving from the current 1.5 to 2.5% property tax equivalent. But those are all considerations that you'll take into account when you do your multi-year budget.
Thank you for that clarification. That's how I appreciate that, and that does make sense to look at those both together. I guess my last question would be, is there a reason why we wouldn't look at this now, at 2 more years to our 30-year window to give us a little more grace period, or is it just because there's still work to be done, that's why we're waiting to the 2028 budget round, since we're in the baby plan stage, as you said? Is that why we're looking at the next budget discussions to tackle that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, absolutely. Same sort of thing. We need to make sure that they're, to connect these to the budget process, the creation of the long-term financial plan is probably going to take about 18 months to do. And so that's why we've approached it in this way.
Thank you very much.
Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
Counselor B. McGregor?
Yes.
Counselor Bondi?
Yes.
All votes are in. Motion passes 17-0. 18B, Talbot Trail realignment.
Councillor Anderson and Councillor Harrigan, can I get you to the floor, please?
Yes.
And seconded.
Councillor Anderson, you had a question.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to get a little bit of clarification, kind of like the backstory of where we're at on this, and I appreciate the conversations I was able to have with Edward today. And I understand that the consultant's here tonight. Yes, thank you. Could you just give me a backstory of what is taking place and what the delay is, and that we are still obviously wanting to go forward with this recommendation?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Mark McFadden, Manager of Engineering. I'll start maybe just with a quick background, and then I'll introduce Adri as well. So, as I'm sure all of you are aware, we started with the EA and the EA addendum. As part of that EA process, we were required to do a stage 1 archaeological assessment. So that was completed through the EA. So the stage 1 essentially kind of determines if there's a potential for archaeological sites to be within the project area, and if there are, then it recommends a stage 2. So the stage 2, as we knew that through the EA process, we incorporated that into our detailed design RFP with the consultant. So we completed that. That started in December of 2024. We got through the stage 2, and it was determined that the findings in the stage 2 were significant enough to trigger stage 3. So that's where, at that point, we kind of got into working with AECOM to follow through with stage 3, and then potentially the stage 4 at that time, as we didn't know the extents of it. So yes, Adri is here with AECOM. So she can probably answer your questions on the archaeological assessment and the process a lot easier, and probably kind of explain the findings and where we're at this point and kind of the steps forward. So she has a few slides, I think, that probably kind of sum up a lot of that. So I'll hand it over to her.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, so I'm Andrea Grant. I'm the technical lead for cultural resources at AECOM. Thank you for that. So I just pulled together a few brief slides, kind of just a little bit of background on the process and then specific to this project, just to help everybody understand. So we can go to the next one. So archaeology in Ontario, this is run through the Heritage Branch at the Ministry of Citizenship and Multiculturalism. That is the ministry that governs everything. They license the archaeologists, and they've created the standards and guidelines for consultant archaeologists, which is the primary document that really governs the entire process. It is a 4-stage process. So the stage 1, you're looking at background research. Really the point of that is to decide, like, is there the potential for an archaeological resource to be there? You get into stage 2, that's when you're doing that initial survey, seeing what you find. And then based on what you find, that's when it's decided whether you need to move towards the site-specific excavation. And the main goal of the stage 3 really is to get in and figure out exactly what the limits of the site are, and then also get a better idea through the material that you've recovered, what you're actually looking at, decide whether or not it warrants mitigation. So that's the stage 4, and the mitigation could be, deciding to avoid and protect something, or if it's not feasible to do that, you move towards controlled excavation, fully removing it out of the ground, but doing it in such a way that all the information isn't lost. You can go to the next slide. I will speak as well, too, to the timing of that. I think Mark spoke to that a little bit. There's some flexibility when you get into these different stages. With an EA, it is required that you do a stage 1. And because it's still fairly general and you're often looking at a lot of different alternatives, doing the stage 2 physical survey is quite intensive, and it costs a lot of money, and most times you don't want to be doing that until you know exactly where you're going to impact. So that's usually what it happens. The stage 1 is pretty early. Once you have a really good idea of where the project will impact, that's when you get into the stage 2, and then of course stage 3 and 4 only follow if you have a resource that meets that criteria. And then another thing on the timing as well, so it's a term and condition of the archaeologist license that we engage with Indigenous groups when we're doing stage 3 or stage 4 of an Indigenous site. But that being said, best practice, and most municipalities, most major companies and clients, they are involving interested Indigenous groups at the stage 2 level, which I believe is what happened here. And so I've just put up some criteria of why you need to move in there. I think what's important to note is that it really, professional judgment doesn't come into play at all. It is very, very clearly outlined in those standards and guidelines. If you meet this criteria, yes, no, yes, no. So if we want to go to the next slide. So this is the actual project, and what happened that I think was a surprise to everybody, but not uncommon when it comes to archaeology, is that after the stage 2, once we started looking further and getting into that stage 3, we were finding a lot more things than we anticipated. And that's just, the virtue of looking on the ground versus actually getting in and digging and seeing what's there. So all of this jumbled mess of colors just essentially shows to you that in this stretch on this project, there's a lot of archaeology going on here. So if you want to go to the next slide. I'll explain a little bit so you can kind of understand what's going on. The purple dots here are the location of the stage 2 surface artifacts. So that's what, and the yellow line is essentially the limits of the sites as it was understood during the stage 2. Now what happened is when you look at the yellow dots, so when we came in, we did another surface examination, we found a lot more material, and you see the sites have expanded incredibly. Another important piece is that the types of artifacts that we were finding, during the stage 2, it was all lithic material, non-diagnostic, but when we got there, we are finding Indigenous pottery and ceramics, which is a diagnostic, and it kind of opens the door to a whole other set of rules. So we can go to the next one. This is a perfect example here. So if you see that purple dot and the yellow around it, this was considered one, fine spot. But when we get there and we see all of this other material there, there's clearly a lot more going on. So we can go to the next one. This is an example. You can't see the numbers. So this was our stage 3. Each of those squares represents an actual 1 meter by 1 meter excavation unit in the plow zone of the agricultural field. So we go down through that whole plow zone, and then we have to essentially chase the artifacts. We keep going until we get less than 10 or certain special things. And what happened here, as you can kind of see, is it just kind of kept going. We can go to the next one. Similar to this one, you see the yellow line of where the site was thought to be, did need to extend it out a little bit further. We can go to the next one. This site is, and we've done a lot more here because this is where we are focusing, because we know that it needs stage 4. Because this is in a wooded area, it's not in the plowed field. Because we have features, and pottery, it is a woodland time period site, which means, and it could potentially be intact. And what I mean by that is that the plows haven't smeared it around. So it has to be done completely by hand. That's our only option. Whereas with some of the other sites, we do have the option of a combination of hand excavation and also mechanical, like using a machine. So we can go to the next one. Again, just another example of it kind of being a little bigger than anyone would have anticipated. And you can go to the next slide. So this is essentially the steps where we're at. So we know the stage 3 is completed, and that report should be ready this week or next week at the latest. But we know that all of those sites that I just showed do require stage 4 mitigation. And understanding that, you don't have a lot of leeway, that project area needs to be impacted. So we're looking at excavation, fully removing it out of the way. And like I said, that would be done in a combination of hand excavation, but also using some machinery as well. What we're seeing also is these, we're not we're not assessing outside of the project area, but we are seeing these sites go right to the end of the project area. So essentially, we're quite clear, and there's going to be an instance where we know these sites do extend outside. We don't need to impact those, but we will have to put in some protection during construction so that we know that nothing happens to it and they can stay where they are. Throughout this entire process, we continue to consult with the Indigenous groups. They're participating with us on site. We're coordinating with them when we're coming up with our strategy. Timing-wise, when we get to stage 4, and it's a fair amount of work in order to get that done, but we do have the option, which I've recommended, is, once we've finished the excavation, you then have all the material and the artifacts that you have to process and analyze and go through all of that, which can take some time. But at this point, we've already removed it out of the ground. So what we can do is we can write a preliminary excavation report that satisfies the ministry. What it does is it provides all the methods that we did, everything that we did as far as the excavation went, for removing it, but it leaves out the artifact piece. And what that does is it allows the ministry to say, okay, we're comfortable with this preliminary excavation report. Construction can proceed while we take the time to do the thorough requirement of analyzing all the artifacts and going through all of that. We're still required to provide that final report, but construction doesn't have to wait for us to get through that in order for that to happen. And then essentially, when the MCM acceptance really is that letter saying you're clear to go, and then that's it, kind of how it goes.
Thank you so much, and I certainly appreciate you explaining this. And I want to say I'm definitely very, very glad that this process is in place and that we are preserving any Indigenous findings, and that we do include them in this process as well. It's definitely worth the additional cost, I would say, to preserve any findings, and it also is worth the delay in the project. But I do understand some frustrations of the public, and that's the only thing that I wanted, was to have some clarity provided as to why there's this delay and the steps that are taken with a little bit more detail. So I certainly appreciate that. As far as cost goes, do we get any reimbursement from the ministry or from the Indigenous groups in this recovery process, or is this solely on the municipality?
Typically, it's solely on the municipality. I know of some municipalities that have tried to get various grants through ministries. I haven't heard of anyone being successful, but essentially it's fully proponent covered.
Okay, thank you so much. I did just have one further question. Another question that I got was actually to the greenhouse operation that's there. And it was thought by the public that they didn't have to go through this process. Can you clarify what happened on that site, to as much that you can provide with transparency and confidentiality?
I mean, I don't know. I looked to see if there was any reports for that area, because funny enough, like a long time ago, maybe 2016, I did the archaeology at a different consultant for a greenhouse in Chatham-Kent, and I was like, was that the same one? But I couldn't find any reports for it. This is a requirement, and it falls under the, it is the Ontario Heritage Act that says you have to do it, but the Ontario Heritage Act, just you're in violation of that if you impact an archaeological resource. It doesn't say you have to do an assessment. So that tends to fall under the Planning Act, a number of different policies, but sometimes it gets missed. So I can't speak to that particular place, but yeah, sometimes that happens.
Okay, thanks, Bruce.
Thank you, Your Worship. Maybe I can just elaborate. I can probably speculate on what would have happened there. So greenhouses are permitted as of right in our agricultural zoning. So they wouldn't have required a trigger for an assessment. Ultimately, any development you do, like we've had others that have uncovered archaeological artifacts, just even through building construction and excavation, that's kind of the scenario. If you find it, then it would trigger moving forward. So the other greenhouse that I think you were referring to would have been the one here in town that did require land use changes to permit it in an industrial zone at the time. So I recall that triggered an archaeological assessment. So that's the difference in why.
Okay, thank you. So if they would have found something, it wouldn't have gone to the public, but they would have been required to report to the ministry, is what you're saying?
Correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Story.
Thank you very much. This is very interesting. You mentioned that it's a woodland period series of artifacts. What time frame are we talking about in terms of human history,
Now you're
roughly?
Woodland typically starts around 600 BC up to about, and we usually say around contact, so 14 to 1600s. So it's a wide time period, and frankly, the only difference is that it's pottery is the big indicator. It was at a time that Indigenous groups started using pottery, and we start seeing it in there, and it kind of helps us date it to a certain time period.
So it's any like 600 plus or more years old, potentially.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
Councillor Bondi?
Yes.
Councillor B. McGregor?
Yes.
All votes are in. Motion passes 17-0.
We'll move on to notice of motion. Councillor Scotch, you have two of them.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Whereas an independent audit by Deloitte conducted for the Chatham-Kent Police Services did highlight a staffing shortage and recommended increasing staffing to meet service demands, and whereas that the Deloitte audit found that the total calls for service have increased, which has turned to increased total for police attending, and whereas the Deloitte audit found that the police budget for police officer strength had remained the same from, you mind reading that?
And whereas that Deloitte audit found that the police budget for police officer strength had remained the same from 2018 to 2021, and whereas that Deloitte audit found that CKPS has a low policing ratio compared to the provincial and Canadian averages, and whereas the Deloitte audit found that the proactive work had decreased, officers are required to attend more calls, leaving less time for proactive and preventative work, and whereas that Deloitte audit found CKPS employees' well-being had been compromised with an increase to the use of sick time and long-term illness, and whereas Deloitte also noted that officers were wearing too many hats and suggested streamlining responsibilities for greater efficiency, and whereas CKPS is nearing the completion of the hiring process and there has been significantly positive feedback in the Chatham area. Therefore, be it resolved that Chatham-Kent Council requests the Chief of Police attend at a future council meeting and present a report updating council and the public about implementation of the hiring process and revised processes to assist in dealing with the identified issues. And as the municipality of Chatham-Kent is still seeing an increase in police-related needs, that the Chief be asked to also highlight any future initiatives for all communities of Chatham-Kent.
Thank you. The light got me a little spotty there for a second. Whereas Chatham-Kent currently reports on its operating budget variance, and whereas purchasing bylaw 205-2025 provides the delegated authority to award the contracts of the value less than $1 million with approved budget, and whereas there has been a recent coverage of capital projects being over budget while many capital projects that are within budget go unreported, therefore be it resolved that Infrastructure and Engineering Services bring forward an annual information report to council on the tenders and RFPs that were awarded for the year through delegated authority.
Okay, closed session reports. Councillor Hall, and can I get Councillor Bondi to second it?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Confidentiality in closed session meetings. Closed session meetings of council are held to discuss sensitive matters such as legal issues, personnel matters, or property negotiations. These sessions are governed by strict confidentiality to protect the interests of the municipality and individuals involved. Council members and staff are legally and ethically bound to maintain discretion, and any disclosure of information discussed in closed session may result in penalties or legal consequences. Closed session report for Monday, June 23rd, 2025. Council received information on litigation or potential litigation affecting the municipality or local board and advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege with regard to claims and litigation update, section 239 2E and F of the Municipal Act. And I so move.
Councillor Bondi?
Yes.
And Counselor B. McGregor?
Yes.
All votes are in, motion passes 17-0.
Communication items. Counselor Finn, you wanted to pull 2C.
Yes, thank you. Kind of disheartened to read yet again that we received no funding for our sports, Community Sport and Recreation Infrastructure Fund. If somebody could explain, do we know when the last time was we received funding from this grant program? And what does this now mean for the project that was submitted?
Perhaps I can answer part of that. Like for arenas, we have received grant funding. I'm not sure if it was from this program or from another sports program. As governments come out, they've announced different forms of funding. But the Wallaceburg Arena rebuild, we did receive about $1 million of funding when we replaced the floor and did a lot of renovations there. But it's very disappointing that we did not receive funding for the Blenheim Arena. It aligned perfectly with the purpose of the grant. It all comes down to be that the grants offered by upper levels never have enough funding to go around, and I can't explain why Chatham-Kent was left out again.
So what does it mean now for the Blenheim Arena?
So it was still budgeted, it still was in the capital budget to fund. We were hoping to offset Chatham-Kent dollars so we could move those dollars to a new project. Instead, it'll just be Chatham-Kent property tax dollars going to that project in, I believe it's in 2027, then it's actually being done, but.
Thank you.
Counselor Finn and Counselor Doyle, can I get you to move the communication items, please?
Happy to move it.
Happy to second that.
Any questions? Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Non-agenda business. Oh, okay, we got, hang on, just, hold up your hand, just, okay. We got 8 minutes, so we get a lot, yeah, so I'm sure we'll fit all this in. See, sorry, who else over here? Okay, right, okay. Councillor Scotchy, followed by Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Just wanted to remind everybody that on Canada Day, the Glad Tidings Church is having a very big fireworks display, and also that the Blenheim Fire Department is celebrating 150 years. And lastly, I just wanted to, there was several events around CK last weekend, and dozens and probably hundreds of volunteers. And I just want to thank all the volunteers that make these wonderful events happen, whether it be a car show or, you know, all the events that's happening across our community. Thank you.
Councillor Anderson, followed by Councillor Juneville.
Thank you. I just wanted to remind everybody that this weekend is the Wheatley Fish Festival. There's things happening Friday, Saturday, and Sunday at the harbor, at the arena, and uptown Wheatley. So bring your family, bring your friends, and come and enjoy some time with us. Thanks.
Councillor Juneville, followed by Councillor C. McGregor.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I have been contacted by quite a few residents from Dresden today who have shared some pictures and concerns with me. It appears there was a lot of activity at the York 1 site today, and many people have asked if we have any knowledge, authority, or governance over what is currently happening there.
Thank you, Worship. Maybe I can answer that. Yeah, we do have some knowledge of activity happening on that site. It's really hard to say whether or not we have any authority. I mean, they have the right to use their property legally like anybody else does. We will be keeping an eye on them, and I encourage people to share with their counselors or us if they see any activity that is you know, beyond what they're entitled to do. We will be reminding them what their zoning is. And if anyone sees any, you know, there's certain things, obviously if buildings go up, it's subject to the Ontario Building Code. If there's any earthworks that's happening that's going to impact drains or water courses, then they need the proper permissions for that. So we'll certainly keep an eye on it. I just would urge people to do so legally. I'd hate to see somebody get hurt or be charged for trespassing. We'll make sure that our enforcement people drop by from time to time as well. I will take the opportunity to indicate we still have not heard from York 1, nor from the province. So if there has been a new new application filed now that Bill 5 has been passed. We have not been advised by either the province or York 1 of that. Obviously, when we are, we'll let you know. But as of right now, we don't know what the plans are. And we know that the EA is not a requirement anymore by legislation. We're not really sure how the ESA is going to be addressed. So as soon as we get more information, we'll let you know. But in the interim, any information that people have about the use of the site, we're happy to collect.
Councillor C. McGregor, followed by Councillor Wright.
Thank you, and you can thank Councillor Finn for me to remember this one, but this past week, through my Food Policy Council, I met with Trevor Jones in regards to some of the direction as envisioned with the Food Policy Council. But in that conversation, he mentioned that should we at any point in time be submitting grants or submissions through to the provincial government, he indicated that he could not help us write those grants or whatever, but once those grants are written, that if we wish to include him afterwards, that he would be more than happy to help see that those submissions get in front of the right people to try and help us gain access to some of that funding.
Your Worship, thank you for that, Councillor. We do. It hasn't helped yet necessarily, but in fairness, the Minister has a new portfolio now, so perhaps that's something that will allow him to be more helpful.
Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Ridgetown is starting to celebrate their 150 years this year. Their parade's Friday night. Everyone's welcome, 6 o'clock. The Ridge House Museum's got their 50th anniversary. They just redone their museum. It really looks good. If you get a chance, get out and go through it. And hats off to Thamesville. We were there, me and the mayor, on Friday night. We went through the parade, and they had a great festival all weekend. So thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to reading of the bylaws. First and second reading. Councillor Crew McDonald.
So moved.
Seconded.
Anyone opposed? Motion carried. Councillor Hall and Councillor Jubenville, third and final reading.
So moved.
And seconded.
Anyone opposed? Motion carried. Resolution of council. Councillor Hall, and then if we can get, I don't know, who did I write down for this one? Councillor Scotchy. Second this one.
Seconded.
I move that Chatham-Kent Council adjourn to its next meeting to be held on Monday, July 14th, 2025, and that Chatham-Kent Council authorize itself to meet in closed session on that day to discuss any matters permitted by the municipal act.
I so second it again.
From Councillor Zagachi is seconded. Anyone opposed? Wrapping it up at 9:57. 3 minutes to spare. There we go. Thanks, everybody.